Hello guys, welcome to Pika Fiction. So in this video, we will see what if Ash became the monarch and his prize was marriage to Cynthia and Diantha. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1, The weight of the crown. The world held its breath in a single, unified gasp. In the heart of Winden Stadium, under the glare of 1,000,000 lights and the gaze of 1,000,000,000 more, two titans stood on a field of scorched earth and shattered rock. Gigantamax had faded, Dynamax had been spent. The weather effects had cancelled each other out in a final, hissing gasp of steam. All the grand, stadium-shaking mechanics of the Masters 8 tournament were gone. Now, it was just this. A Charizard, wreathed in the faint, smoldering embers of its own fighting spirit, and a Pikachu, so small on the vast battlefield that he looked like a child's forgotten toy. Leon, the unbeatable champion of Galar, stood with his arms crossed, his signature cape torn and singed at the edges. A thin line of sweat traced its way down his temple, but his expression was one of fierce, unadulterated joy. This was a battle for the ages. This was what he had lived for. Opposite him, Ash Ketchum's hat was turned backward. His jacket was gone, discarded somewhere in the heat of the 6-on-6 war. His eyes, narrowed in concentration, saw nothing but the two Pokémon on the field. He and Pikachu were a single entity, connected by a bond that transcended words. The roar of the crowd, the frantic commentary, the weight of the moment, it all dissolved into a silent, focused tunnel. Charizard's chest heaved, a low growl rumbling from deep within. The last dregs of its G-Max wildfire still clung to the air, making it shimmer with heat. Leon didn't need to give a command. His partner knew. This was the end. One final, decisive strike. It all comes down to this, the announcer screamed, his voice cracking with emotion. After a battle that has pushed both Monarch and Challenger to their absolute limits, only their first partners remain. Can Pikachu withstand another onslaught from Leon's monstrous Charizard? Ash's voice was low, meant only for his partner. You feel it, too, right, buddy? Pikachu's ears twitched. His cheeks sparked, not with exhaustion, but with defiant energy. Pika. They both felt it. The slight waver in Charizard's stance. The minuscule delay in its breath. It was on the very edge of collapse, running on nothing but pride. One more big hit would do it. But Pikachu was in the same state. A direct hit from anything would be the end. Leon knew it. Ash knew it. Charizard, Dragon Pulse. Leon roared, thrusting his hand forward. It was a feint. Ash saw it in the fractional shift of Leon's shoulders. The real attack would be something physical, something Charizard could pour the last of its strength into. He was trying to bait out a dodge, to create an opening. Ash didn't fall for it. Pikachu, stand your ground. Iron Tail on the field. It was a bizarre command. Pikachu didn't leap to dodge. He didn't charge forward. He spun on the spot, his tail glowing with a metallic sheen, and slammed it into the dirt. The ground cracked. It wasn't an attack. It was an anchor. Charizard opened its maw, but instead of the swirling draconic energy of a dragon pulse, it tucked its wings and lunged, its body suddenly cloaked in the furious red energy of Flare Blitz. The dragon pulse was a ghost, a mere whisper of energy to mask the true, all-or-nothing charge. The crowd shrieked. It was the move that had ended so many of Leon's battles. A point-blank Flare Blitz was inescapable. He fell for it, the Galar-biased commentator yelled. Leon's feint worked. It's over. But Ash was smiling. A sharp, predatory grin that was a universe away from his usual sunny disposition. This was the instinct that had carried him across the world, through countless battles. This was what it looked like when he was in his element. Now, Pikachu. Use the recoil. Ash bellowed. As Charizard's fiery form was about to engulf him, Pikachu kicked off the ground with his anchored tail. The iron tail, still embedded in the cracked earth, acted as a fulcrum. He didn't dodge left or right, he vaulted upward. He rocketed into the air, a tiny yellow blur against the stadium lights, soaring over the charging flare blitz. For a heartbeat, Charizard was exposed. Its forward momentum was too great to stop. It was committed, its back now turned to the airborne Pikachu. Leon's eyes widened. He had overplayed his hand. He had counted on Ash dodging, not using his own attack to rewrite the laws of physics on the fly. Time seemed to slow. Ash saw the arc of Pikachu's flight, the vulnerable space above the mighty Charizard, the perfect, once-in-a-lifetime opening. All the energy they had conserved, all the Z-power he still held in his ring from a bond that resonated all the way from Alola, was about to be unleashed. This is it. Ash yelled, his voice raw, pouring every ounce of his will, his journey, his dreams into the call. Let's show them our full power. 10 million. Volt. Thunderbolt. He mimicked the pose, a familiar dance of power. The Z-ring on his wrist blazed with a light so pure, so intense, it bleached the color from the stadium. A rainbow of energy surged from Ash into the sky, converging on Pikachu. The little mouse Pokémon became a sun. A torrent of lightning, not yellow, but a blinding, multi-hued cataclysm of electrical fury, crashed down from the heavens. It didn't just strike Charizard, it consumed it. The roar of the thunder was deafening, a physical force that shook the stadium to its foundations. The flare blitz sputtered and died, its fire extinguished by a power that felt primal, elemental, absolute. Charizard stood for a second, silhouetted against the fading light, before its legs buckled. It fell forward, crashing to the ground with a tremor that was felt in the bones of every person watching. A swirl of unconsciousness appeared in its eyes. Silence. A profound, echoing silence fell over Winden Stadium. 100,000 people, and not a soul made a sound. Then, the referee, who had been shielding his eyes, slowly lowered his arm. He stared at the downed Charizard, then at the panting Pikachu, who was now surrounded by a faint, crackling aura. He raised his flag. Charizard is unable to battle. Pikachu is the winner. Which means the victory, and the title of World Monarch, goes to the challenger, Ash Ketchum. The silence broke. It shattered into a roar so loud, so explosive, it felt like the sky was being torn apart. Ash stood, chest heaving, as the reality of the words washed over him. He did it. After all this time, all the leagues, all the losses, all the training. He was the very best. He sank to his knees, not from exhaustion, but from the sheer, crushing weight of his dream finally realized. Pikachu, seeing his trainer, scrambled across the ruined field and leaped into his arms, nuzzling against his cheek. "We did it, buddy," Ash whispered, his voice thick with emotion, hugging his partner tightly. "We really did it." On the other side of the field, Leon recalled his Charizard with a quiet murmur of thanks. He walked across the battlefield, his shadow long in the stadium lights, and offered his hand to the new Monarch. "That final move," Leon said, his voice filled with genuine awe. "I've never seen anything like it. You don't just battle, Ash. You create." It was an honor. Ash took his hand and stood, a wide, weary grin spreading across his face. "You too, Leon. That was the greatest battle of my life." The world was celebrating, but for the boy from Pallet Town, the moment was small, personal, and perfect. He was the Monarch. He had reached the summit. He had no idea that he was standing on the edge of a cliff. The coronation ceremony was an exercise in organized pageantry. Held an hour later on a magnificent stage. Erected in the center of the field, it was a stark contrast to the chaotic passion of the battle. Ash, now cleaned up and dressed in a formal, if slightly ill-fitting, suit mandated by the league, stood awkwardly as dignitaries and officials droned on. He had been handed the towering gold trophy, a monstrous thing that was nearly as tall as he was. It felt cold and impersonal compared to the warmth of Pikachu, who sat on his shoulder, occasionally trying to chew on the collar of his shirt. At the center of the stage, behind a grand podium bearing the Pokémon World Coronation Series emblem, stood Chairman Serdar. He was a man who seemed to be composed entirely of sharp angles and starched fabric. His silver hair was combed into a severe, unmoving helmet, and his thin lips were perpetually pressed into a line of faint disapproval. He had run the league's bureaucratic arm for decades, a master of rules and regulations, and he viewed trainers like Ash as volatile, unpredictable elements that needed to be managed. And so, Serdar said, his voice amplified to fill the stadium, carrying a dry, reedy tone that sucked the energy from the air, we commemorate not just a victory, but a transition. A new era for the Pokémon world. An era to be led by our new world monarch, Ash Ketchum. A wave of polite, then thunderous, applause swept the stadium. Ash offered a slightly clumsy wave, feeling the heat of 1,000 cameras on him. He just wanted to go get something to eat with his Pokémon. Serdar held up a hand, silencing the crowd. The gesture was crisp, economical, and instantly obeyed. However, this transition comes at a time of unprecedented global instability. A murmur rippled through the audience. On the screen, the commentators looked at each other in confusion. This was not part of the script. For months, Serdar continued, his voice taking on a graver tone, the Pokémon League Committee has been monitoring a series of disturbing phenomena. Unexplained energy spikes in remote locations. A rise in unprovoked, unusually aggressive Pokémon behavior. Seismic activities in regions long dormant. Our world, for all its festive spirit today, is teetering on a delicate balance. Ash frowned. He'd heard whispers of this. Professor Oak had mentioned some odd readings, and he'd gotten a garbled message from Professor Kukui about strange occurrences around the Alolan Ultra wormholes. But he had been so focused on the tournament, he hadn't given it much thought. The title of Monarch is not merely ceremonial, Serdar declared, his gaze sweeping over the crowd before landing squarely on Ash. It carries with it a burden of responsibility, a duty to ensure the stability and unity of all regions. In times of great peril, our ancestors understood that symbols were as powerful as any Pokémon. They understood that unity could not be merely requested, it had to be forged. He paused for dramatic effect, letting the weight of his words settle. Ash felt a knot of unease tighten in his stomach. This was going somewhere he didn't like. Therefore, after an emergency session and a unanimous vote by the League Committee, we have chosen to invoke a dormant, but legally binding, provision. A failsafe created by the first monarchs to safeguard the world in times of extreme crisis. We are invoking the Monarch's Charter. The name hung in the air, heavy and unknown. Nobody in the crowd seemed to have heard of it. The commentators were frantically flipping through notes, their faces blank. Serdar allowed himself a sliver of a smile. The Monarch's Charter, Article 3, Section 2, states that to consolidate the power and spirit of the regions against a pervasive, world-spanning threat, the sitting monarch must enter into a binding political union. A marriage, to form a triad of leadership that will serve as a beacon of strength and solidarity for all people and Pokémon. The stadium went from confused murmuring to stunned, absolute silence. Ash's brain short-circuited. Marriage? The Charter dictates that the monarch's partners must be champions of unimpeachable character, strategic mastery, and regional significance, Serdar announced, his voice ringing with triumph. They must represent both our storied heritage and our dynamic future. The committee's selection, in accordance with these ancient tenets, is therefore absolute. He gestured to the massive view screen behind the stage. 2 images appeared, side by side. To represent the deep well of history, wisdom, and the unshakable spirit of Sinnoh. Champion Cynthia. The screen showed a still photograph of the Sinnoh champion. Regal, powerful, her expression unreadable. Even in a static image, her presence was formidable. And to represent the forward-thinking culture, influence, and charismatic heart of Kalos. Champion Diantha. A second photo appeared. The world-famous actress and champion, smiling with practiced elegance, a picture of grace and modernity. Serdar turned back to Ash, his eyes glinting with something that looked disturbingly like victory. Congratulations, Monarch Ketchum. Your prize for becoming the strongest trainer in the world is not just a trophy. It is a sacred duty. And 2 fiancés. The world erupted. But it wasn't a cheer. It was a sound of collective, disbelieving chaos. Ash just stood there, the colossal trophy feeling heavier than a Snorlax, his mind completely, utterly blank. Pikachu, sensing his trainer's shock, let out a confused and worried, Pika. In a quiet, book-lined study overlooking the snow-dusted slopes of Mount Coronet, the air crackled with a tension colder than the Sinnoh winter outside. Cynthia stood before a holographic screen displaying the chaos from Wyndon, her arms crossed, her grey eyes narrowed into chips of slate. The only sound was the crackle of a nearby fireplace and the soft clink of a teacup being set down. Well, an aged voice said dryly. That's certainly one way to accept a proposal. Cynthia didn't turn. She continued to stare at the image of a bewildered Ash Ketchum being mobbed by reporters. He didn't accept it, grandmother. It was inflicted upon him. Upon all 3 of us. Professor Carolina, Cynthia's grandmother and a renowned researcher of Sinnoh mythology, sat in a high-backed chair, her face a web of thoughtful wrinkles. The Monarch's Charter. I thought that was just a myth, a piece of political folklore from the Warring Regions era. To think they actually invoked it. Serdar dug it up, Cynthia said, her voice dangerously low. She finally turned from the screen, pacing the length of the room. Her usual serene composure was gone, replaced by a restless, caged energy. Garchomp, who had been dozing by the fire, lifted its head, sensing its trainer's agitation. This has his fingerprints all over it. He despises unpredictability. Ash Ketchum is the definition of unpredictability. Serdar couldn't control him, so he shackled him. Shackled him to you, Carolina pointed out gently. And to the Kalos champion. He surrounded the wild card with the 2 most stable, publicly revered figures in the world. From a political standpoint, it's brilliant. And utterly ruthless. It's archaic, Cynthia snapped, her fingers tightening into a fist. I am not a political bargaining chip. My life, my work, it is not something to be bartered away for a manufactured sense of stability. She stopped her pacing, her gaze distant. And Diantha, she values her independence as much as I do. More, perhaps. She has built an empire on her own terms. And the boy? Carolina asked, her eyes sharp. The new monarch? Cynthia's expression softened for a fraction of a second. She remembered him from her time in Unova. Young, reckless, but with a fire in his eyes and a bond with his Pokémon that was remarkable. He's a child who just achieved his life's dream. And they've turned it into a gilded cage before he could even begin to enjoy it. He has no interest in politics or charters. He just wants to battle. A monarch's duty is more than battling, Carolina said softly. Perhaps Serdar is right about one thing. The world is changing. The legends are stirring. Maybe this is what the world needs. A union of raw power, ancient wisdom, and modern influence. Cynthia looked at her grandmother, a flash of defiance in her eyes. Then it should be a union of choice. Not coercion. She pulled out her datapad, her fingers flying across the screen. I'm accessing the League's historical archives now. I want to see the full text of this charter. Every line. Every loophole. Her expression hardened into one of grim determination. She was no longer just a champion. She was a scholar, a strategist, and now, a cornered political player. And she would not be outmaneuvered. Thousands of miles away, in a lavish private cinema within her penthouse apartment in Lumio City, the scene played out on a screen the size of a wall. Diantha sat perfectly still in a plush velvet seat, a glass of untouched water on the table beside her. Her expression was one of cool, placid neutrality. It was the same face she wore at press conferences when asked an impertinent question. Her manager, a harried-looking man named Jean-Luc, was not so composed. He was pacing frantically, his phone pressed to his ear. "No, I will not be issuing a statement at this time," he hissed into the device. "Do you have any idea what you're asking? Just run the clips from the perfume campaign. Any of them. Goodbye." He hung up, swiping a hand through his already disheveled hair. "The world is having a meltdown," he said, gesturing wildly at the screen where Diantha's face was now plastered next to Ash's and Cynthia's under a dozen different sensational headlines. The Royal Triad. Monarch's mandated love. It's a public relations apocalypse. Diantha finally moved. She picked up her glass of water, took a slow, deliberate sip, and set it down with a soft click. "It's a role, Jean-Luc. A very large, very complicated one that I did not audition for." "A role?" "Diantha, this is a marriage. A legally binding, life-altering arrangement. With the Sinnoh champion, who smiles about as often as a graveler, and a boy who looks like he just learned how to tie his own shoes." "He just defeated Leon," Diantha countered, her voice calm but with an edge of steel. "Do not mistake his youth for incompetence. There is more to him than meets the eye." Her gaze lingered on Ash's face on the screen. The shock, the confusion, but underneath it, a stubborn set to his jaw. He was a fighter. She recognized the look. "Fine, he's a prodigy, a battling genius," Jean-Luc conceded, exasperated. "That doesn't make him a suitable partner. Your brand, your career, everything you've built. We have the premiere for Princess Gardevoir's Resolve in 3 weeks." Diantha's lips thinned. For the first time, a crack appeared in her perfect composure. "Do you think I am not aware of that, Jean-Luc? Do you think I am pleased?" She stood, her elegant silver gown shimmering under the soft lights. "Serdar has played a masterful hand. He has tied this to global security. If I refuse, I am not just turning down a proposal, I am rejecting my duty as a champion. I become selfish. Unpatriotic. My public image would be ruined far more effectively than by accepting." She walked to the large window overlooking the glowing prism tower. The city lights of Lumio spread out before her like a carpet of jewels. Her city. Her region. "Cynthia will be digging into the legal text," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "She will look for a way to dismantle it from the inside out. That is her way." She turned back, her eyes sharp and calculating. "My role is different. I need to manage the narrative. I need to meet him. I need to meet them. I need to understand the pieces on the board before I can decide how to play the game." Jean-Luc stared at her, dumbfounded. "So you're going along with it?" A small, wry smile touched Diantha's lips. It didn't reach her eyes. "For now, I am playing the part the world has been given. The graceful, dutiful champion who accepts her role for the good of all." She smoothed down the front of her gown. "Get me a secure line to Winden. And find out everything there is to know about Ash Ketchum. Not the battle stats. The man." Jean-Luc nodded, already pulling out his tablet. Diantha turned back to the window, her reflection staring back at her. The smiling actress, the powerful champion. And underneath, a woman who felt the walls of a beautifully decorated cage closing in around her. The suite was on the top floor of Winden's most luxurious hotel, a place of sterile opulence. White walls, minimalist furniture, and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking, if impersonal, view of the city. It felt less like a room and more like a holding cell designed by a high-end fashion magazine. A pair of imposing League security guards stood sentry outside the door. Ash sat on a stiff white sofa, Pikachu curled in his lap, fast asleep. The adrenaline of the battle and the shock of the ceremony had given way to a profound, wearying confusion. He had been whisked away from the stadium, separated from his other Pokémon who were being tended to at the League Center, and brought here to await further instruction. The door opened with a soft electronic chime. Ash looked up to see Cynthia enter. She was even more intimidating in person than on screen. Dressed in her signature black coat, she moved with a quiet, purposeful grace. She held a datapad in one hand, and her expression was that of a scientist about to dissect an interesting but potentially hazardous specimen. She gave Ash a brief, analytical nod. "Monarch Ketchum." Just Ash is fine," he said, shifting uncomfortably. Cynthia didn't sit. She began a slow, deliberate circuit of the room, her eyes taking in every detail. "I have spent the last hour reviewing the full text of the Monarch's charter. It is an authentic historical document, ratified by a council of the original regional founders nearly 1,000 years ago. Legally, it is ironclad." Ash just blinked at her. "Okay." She stopped pacing and faced him directly. "What is not clear is the legitimacy of the threat Sirdar used to invoke it. The energy signatures are real, but their origin and nature are unknown. He has leveraged ambiguity into a political coup." Her voice was crisp, devoid of emotion. "He has used us as his pawns." Before Ash could process that, the door chimed again. Diantha entered, a vision of carefully curated elegance. She offered a small, polite smile that seemed at odds with the tension in the room. "Champion Cynthia." "Monarch Ketchum," she said, her voice as smooth as silk. "A rather dramatic day." "Indeed," Cynthia said, her tone dry. "I was just informing our new monarch that we have been bound by a 1,000-year-old piece of legal maneuvering." Diantha's gaze fell upon Ash, and for a moment, her mask of poise seemed to slip. She wasn't looking at the monarch or a political piece, she was looking at a young man who seemed utterly overwhelmed. She took a seat in the armchair opposite the sofa, a more personable move than Cynthia's perpetual motion. "Chairman Sirdar is a man who values order above all else. He sees you, Ash, as a chaotic element. This charter is his way of putting you in a box, surrounded by, well, by us. Stabilizing influences." She gave a slight, self-deprecating smile. "Or, at least, that is the role we are meant to play." Ash listened to them talk, their words weaving a complex tapestry of politics, history, and strategy that went right over his head. They weren't talking to him, they were talking about him, around him, as if he were a prize Groudon that had just been captured and they were debating how best to contain it. Cynthia was all sharp logic and historical precedent. "The charter has clauses for annulment, but they require either proof of malicious invocation, which would be Sirdar's word against the entire committees, or a unanimous declaration from all 3 members that the union is untenable. Given the public narrative Sirdar has crafted, a refusal would be catastrophic for our public standing." Diantha countered smoothly, "The public narrative can be reshaped. Optics are fluid. A unified refusal, framed correctly, could be seen as a stand against antiquated tyranny. But it's a high-risk gamble. We would need to be perfectly in sync." They went back and forth, their intellects clashing like 2 master swordsmen. Ash felt a headache forming behind his eyes. He looked down at Pikachu, who stirred in his sleep, murmuring a soft "cha." That was it. That was the only thing that mattered. His Pokémon. His friends. This was just noise. "Stop." The word was quiet, but it cut through their debate like a razor. Both champions fell silent, turning to look at him in surprise. Ash stood up, gently placing the sleeping Pikachu on the sofa cushion. He faced the 2 most powerful women in the world, not as a monarch, but as himself. The knot of confusion in his gut had finally hardened into resolve. "I don't know anything about charters, or politics, or optics," he said, his voice steady and clear. "I didn't ask for this. I'm guessing you didn't either." He looked at Cynthia. You want to be out there, exploring ruins and protecting your region, not stuck in a political marriage. He turned to Diantha. And you have movies to make and a championship to defend. You don't have time for this. He took a breath, meeting both their gazes. I just won the biggest battle of my life. I became the Monarch because I want to be the best, to battle trainers and meet Pokemon all over the world. Not to be, this. He gestured vaguely at the opulent room, at the whole ridiculous situation. He finally came to the point, the one simple truth he had distilled from their complex argument. So here's the deal. I don't care what some old piece of paper says. I won't force either of you into anything. Ever. If you want to fight this, I'll back you up. If you want to find a loophole, I'll help you look. If you want to just walk out that door right now and pretend this never happened, that's fine with me. He paused, a flicker of his usual, earnest self breaking through. But Serdar said this was about some kind of threat to the world. If that part's true, if Pokemon and people are in real danger, then that's different. That's a fight I'll join. Not because of a charter, but because it's the right thing to do. A new silence fell over the room. It was different this time. The tension wasn't gone, but it had changed. Cynthia's analytical gaze softened into something more like appraisal. She was seeing the man behind the variable, and he was not what she had expected. Diantha's polite, professional smile faded, replaced by a look of genuine surprise, and perhaps, a sliver of respect. He had completely ignored their intricate power play and cut straight to the heart of the matter. He had offered them an out. He had offered them a choice. In a situation where they had all been stripped of their agency, he was the only one trying to give it back. We'll take that under consideration, Cynthia said finally, her voice a shade less formal. Diantha simply nodded, her expression thoughtful. The blunt sincerity was more disarming than any political maneuver she could have anticipated. Ash nodded back, the resolve draining from him, leaving him feeling just tired again. Good. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to see if this fancy hotel has any ketchup. He walked past them, heading for what he hoped was a kitchen, leaving the two champions alone in the silent, white room, both of them reassessing the strange, unpredictable, and utterly baffling boy who was now, for better or worse, their fiancé. Deep in the Hoenn region, far from the lights of Winden and the glare of the media, a lone technician sat in the dim glow of a monitoring station. The station was a small, reinforced bunker built near the desolate plain surrounding the Cave of Origin, tasked with keeping an eye on the delicate balance of primal energies in the area. It was usually the most boring job in the world. The technician, a young man named Kenji, was half asleep, his chair tilted back, a comic book resting on his chest. Suddenly, a high-pitched alarm blared through the small space, making him jolt upright, his heart pounding. What in the? He scrambled to the main console. A dozen red lights were flashing. The primary energy sensor, which measured ambient dimensional and terrestrial power, was going haywire. The needle was fluctuating wildly before swinging hard into the red, beyond any measurable limit. But it was the geospectral display that made his blood run cold. It showed a topographic map of the surrounding area. Normally, it was a calm sea of green and blue, indicating stable energy levels. Now, a black spot had appeared, centered on a remote, uncharted geological fault line a few clicks east of the Cave of Origin. It wasn't just a lack of energy. It was, a hole. A patch of absolute nothing that was actively sucking the color and data from the map around it. The program was trying to interpret it, spitting out error messages and nonsensical strings of code. Error, signature undefined. Analysis, void. Null data. Entropic cascade. Void? What the hell is a void signature? Kenji muttered, his fingers flying over the keyboard, trying to run a diagnostic. The black spot on the map pulsed once. The lights in the bunker flickered violently. The hum of the machinery died, replaced by an unnerving silence. Then, with a loud crackle of static and a shower of sparks, the entire console went dark. Kenji was plunged into blackness, the only light the faint, eerie glow of the emergency exit sign. The silence was absolute. The alarms were dead. The sensors were dead. He sat there, frozen in the dark, his breath catching in his throat. He felt a sudden, inexplicable chill, a profound sense of emptiness that had nothing to do with the power outage. It felt like something ancient and deeply wrong had just blinked open an eye, and for a terrifying moment, it had looked right at him. Chapter 2, Trial by Fire. The press called it the Unity Tour. A carefully orchestrated, multi-region campaign designed to sell the Monarch's charter to a skeptical world. It was a whirlwind of motorcades, ribbon cuttings, and staged photo opportunities. Chairman Serdar's office had planned it with military precision, and its first stop was the jewel of Unova, Castelia City. Ash felt like a prize toros being paraded at a country fair. He stood on a balcony overlooking Castelia's central plaza, a vast expanse of polished stone and dancing fountains surrounded by skyscrapers that scraped the heavens. A sea of people churned below, their faces upturned, a mixture of adoration, curiosity, and suspicion. The roar of the crowd was a constant, physical pressure, punctuated by the blinding, predatory flash of hundreds of cameras. He tugged at the collar of his new, custom-tailored suit. It was a dark, charcoal gray, sharp and stylish, and he hated it. It felt like a costume for a person he wasn't. "Smile, Ash," a smooth voice murmured beside him. Diantha was a vision of effortless perfection. She wore a flowing white dress that caught the afternoon sun, her posture immaculate, her smile radiant. She lifted a hand and gave a graceful wave to the crowd below, a gesture she had perfected over 1,000 red carpets. It looked natural, warm, and utterly convincing. "I am smiling," Ash grumbled, forcing the corners of his mouth upward. It felt more like a grimace. Pikachu, perched on his shoulder and thankfully exempt from the dress code, mimicked the expression with a pained "Pikaka." On his other side, Cynthia stood like a statue carved from obsidian and ice. She wore a tailored black pantsuit, foregoing the flowing gowns of her counterpart for something more practical and severe. She was not smiling. Her gaze wasn't on the adoring masses but was instead sweeping across the rooftops, noting the positions of League security, the flow of the crowd, the potential choke points and blind spots. "Security is adequate, but not exceptional," she stated, her voice a low counterpoint to the crowd's roar. The variable density of foot traffic in the side alleys presents a significant tactical challenge. An organized hostile force could use them to bypass our primary perimeter. "It's a festival, Cynthia, not a war zone," Diantha said, her smile never wavering as she spoke through it. "Try to enjoy the adulation. It's good for morale." "Adulation is a fickle resource," Cynthia replied without turning. "Security is not." Ash sighed. This had been his life for the past 3 days. Caught between a charismatic star who managed her public image like a strategic campaign and a master strategist who saw the world as a series of potential threats. He felt like a referee for a battle he didn't understand. Their schedule was relentless. After the balcony appearance, they were guided through the throng by a wedge of imposing security guards. Diantha navigated the chaos with the ease of a fish in water, pausing to sign an autograph for a starstruck little girl, offering a perfect soundbite to a reporter from the Unova Times, and complimenting the mayor on the city's vibrant atmosphere. Every move was calculated, every word polished. Cynthia remained aloof, her presence a silent, intimidating bubble. People parted before her, more out of awe and a little fear than the charm Diantha wielded. She kept a hand near the poke ball on her belt, her senses on high alert. Ash was just, trying to keep up. He felt a constant pull, a distraction that warred with the League's rigid itinerary. His eyes were drawn not to the dignitaries, but to the trainers in the crowd. He saw a young boy with a tepig arguing with his friend over battle strategy. He saw a woman grooming her Lilligant by a fountain. He saw the life, the energy, the core of what he loved about the world, and he was separated from it by a wall of security and expectation. Monarch Ketchum, a young voice piped up from the crowd, breaking through the cordon. A boy, no older than 10, with wide, hopeful eyes and a brand-new Pokédex clutched in his hands, had managed to slip past a guard. "Is it true you beat Leon with a Pikachu? Can I see him?" Ash's practiced, awkward smile instantly transformed into a genuine grin. He stopped, turning to the boy. "You bet. Say hi, buddy." Pikachu chirped happily and leaped from Ash's shoulder to the boy's, nuzzling his cheek. The boy gasped in delight, his face lighting up. "Whoa! He's so cool." "Ash, we are on a schedule," Diantha's voice was a pleasant but firm chime in his ear. One of the guards was already moving to gently steer the boy away. "It's fine, just a second," Ash said, waving the guard off. He crouched down to the boy's level. "What's your name?" "Leo," the boy stammered, starstruck. "I'm gonna be a trainer soon. My partner's gonna be a Snivy." "A Snivy, huh?" "Great choice," Ash said warmly. "They're fast. You gotta train its speed. And never give up on it, even if you lose a few battles. That's the most important part." From the corner of his eye, he saw Diantha's smile tighten almost imperceptibly. He knew he was holding things up. He knew this wasn't part of the plan. He didn't care. This was real. This mattered more than shaking hands with some suit from the Castelia Business Association. Suddenly, another distraction caught his ear. A loud argument from a nearby battle court. "Your Pansear is weak. My Panpour will wipe the floor with it," one trainer taunted. "No way. Fire beats water all the—" "Wait, no, that's not right," the other fumbled. Ash's head snapped up, his instincts kicking in. He's got it backward. Pansear needs to use the environment. If he uses a will-o-wisp on the grass, the steam could obscure Panpour's vision and give him an opening for a close-range flame burst, he was muttering to himself, already halfway to the battle court before he realized what he was doing. Cynthia put a firm hand on his arm, stopping him. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Ash. You are not a spectator. You are the main event. Your attention is required here." He looked from the battle court, to the disappointed face of the young boy Leo being led away, to the strained patience on Diantha's face. The joy he'd felt a moment ago evaporated, replaced by a sharp, biting frustration. The golden trophy in Winden felt a million miles away. This felt like a punishment. That was a disaster. The words were spoken in the hushed, climate-controlled quiet of their presidential suite at the top of a glittering Castelia skyscraper. The door had just closed, shutting out the press, the fans, and the suffocating schedule. Diantha had kicked off her heels and was pacing the length of the panoramic window, her white dress a stark contrast to the darkening city outside. Her public smile was gone, replaced by a look of profound irritation. "A disaster?" Ash retorted, finally ripping off the tie he'd been forced to wear. "I talked to a kid. I was about to give some free battle advice. How is that a disaster?" "The disaster, Ash, is the lack of discipline," Diantha shot back, turning to face him. "The entire purpose of this tour is to project an image of unity, strength, and control. When the Monarch breaks formation to chat with a random child or gets distracted by a street battle like a rookie trainer, it projects chaos. It makes us look unprofessional. It makes you look like you can't handle the responsibility you've been given. Maybe that chaos is what people need to see." Ash argued, his voice rising. "They don't need to see us acting like robots. They need to see that we're still trainers, that we still care about the things they care about. That kid, Leo, his whole day was made just by meeting Pikachu. Doesn't that matter more than being on time to a meeting with some guy who sells insurance?" "Yes, it matters," Cynthia interjected, her calm voice cutting through the argument. She had taken a seat in an armchair, a datapad in her lap displaying a schematic of the festival grounds for the next day. From a morale standpoint, your interaction was a net positive. However, Diantha's point about discipline is also valid. You created a security breach. While the child was harmless, a more determined assailant could have used a similar opening. Diantha gestured toward Cynthia. See? Even she agrees. This isn't just about feeling good, Ash. It's a performance. I have spent my entire life learning how to perform, how to control a narrative for a greater purpose. Whether it's on a film set or a public stage, the goal is the same, to make the audience believe in the story you are telling. Our story is that the world is safe in our hands. Your improvisation undermines the script. Ash bristled. I'm not an actor, Diantha. I can't just pretend to be something I'm not. The person they saw out there, the one who gets excited about a battle and wants to help a new trainer. That's who I am. If people have a problem with their monarch being a real person, then maybe the job isn't for me. Don't be so naive, Diantha said, her tone sharp with frustration. Of course the job is for you. You earned it. But you're not just a trainer anymore. You are a symbol. And symbols cannot afford to be reckless. And you cannot afford to be so obsessed with appearances, Cynthia said, looking up from her datapad at Diantha. Your focus on narrative and performance comes at the expense of situational awareness. While you were charming the mayor, I identified 3 individuals in the crowd wearing non-standard communication earpieces and another 2 conducting what appeared to be counter-surveillance. The threat here is not a PR blunder. It's tangible. Diantha's eyes flashed. My obsession with appearances is what keeps the public from panicking, Cynthia. It's what secures political and financial support for the league. It's the soft power that makes your hard power possible. A well-placed smile can prevent a battle more effectively than a well-placed garchomp. The room fell silent, the 3 of them locked in a triangle of opposition. Ash, the avatar of raw, unpolished authenticity. Diantha, the master of charismatic influence. Cynthia, the bastion of cold, hard strategy. 3 immense powers, all pulling in different directions. The unity they were supposed to be projecting was a complete and utter fiction. This isn't going to work, Ash said, the anger draining out of him, replaced by a hollow weariness. He sank onto the sofa, running a hand through his perpetually messy hair. We can't even agree on how to walk down a street. How are we supposed to save the world? Neither of the champions had an answer. The next day's main event was the grand reopening of the Unity Pier, a massive structure that had been damaged during Team Plasma's assault on the city years ago. Its restoration was being hailed as a symbol of Unova's resilience and the world's coming together. A stage had been set up at the pier's entrance, overlooking the water. The sea breeze was a welcome relief from the city's humid heat. The argument from the night before had left a lingering chill between them. They moved through the morning's pleasantries with a strained, professional courtesy. Diantha was even more flawlessly charming, as if to compensate for Ash's perceived failures. Cynthia was even more watchful, her eyes constantly scanning for the threats Diantha seemed to dismiss. Ash just tried to stay on his designated spot and smile when a camera was pointed at him. The mayor of Castelia City was giving a long-winded speech about commerce and friendship. Ash was trying his best to listen, but his attention was drifting. He watched a flock of wind gulls circle overhead. He noted the tide coming in, the way the waves crashed against the pier's thick pylons. Then he saw it. A flicker of movement under the pier. Not a Pokemon. A person, clad in dark gray, planting something on one of the support beams. At the same time, Cynthia, who had been watching the rooftops, stiffened. She had spotted them too. Several figures, dressed in the same nondescript gray uniforms, were emerging from the alleyways they had discussed, moving with purpose through the distracted crowd. They weren't rushing. They were blending. Cynthia leaned over to Ash, her voice a low, urgent whisper. Hostiles. At least a dozen. They're flanking the stage. Diantha, who was standing gracefully at the front of the stage, caught Cynthia's expression. Her perfect smile didn't falter, but her eyes darted to the side, a flicker of alarm in them. Ash didn't wait. He didn't need a plan. He saw a threat. He acted. Pikachu, thunderbolt on that pylon. Now, he yelled. Pikachu, sensing the urgency, leaped from his shoulder and unleashed a crackling bolt of lightning that struck the water just beside the support beam. The man in gray cried out in shock as the electrified water surged around him, forcing him to drop the device he was planting. It was a magnetic limpet mine. The explosion of electricity was the signal. All at once, chaos erupted. The figures in the crowd threw off their cloaks, revealing the same gray uniforms. On their chests was a stark, angular symbol, a broken circle. The Purifiers. For the great cleansing, one of them screamed, releasing a Pokémon. Sever the false bonds. All around the plaza, Pokémon burst from their Pokeballs. A herd of rampaging Tauros, a pack of snarling Mytiana, a crocodile erupting from the ground. But something was horribly wrong with them. Their eyes glowed with a faint, sickly purple light, their movements were jerky and unnatural, and their cries were filled with pain and rage. They weren't fighting with their trainers, they were being driven like mindless weapons. Civilians screamed and scattered, a wave of panic washing through the festival. The Purifiers weren't just attacking the stage, they were attacking the crowd, the food stalls, the symbols of coexistence. Garchomp, let's go! Cynthia shouted, her hand flying to her belt. Her ace emerged with a deafening roar, landing in front of the stage and spreading its arms, a living shield. Gardevoir, protect them. Diantha commanded, her voice ringing with authority. Her own partner materialized in a flash of pink light, immediately throwing up a shimmering light screen to shield a panicked group of families. The battle for Castelia City had begun. And the three of them were on their own. Their initial defense was a testament to their individual power, and a mess of conflicting styles. Garchomp, use Dragon Claw on the Mytiana pack. Contain them by the fountain. Cynthia ordered, her mind instantly mapping the battlefield. Garchomp surged forward, a blur of blue and red, its claws glowing with draconic energy. But just as it was about to engage, Ash, already in the thick of it, yelled his own command. Pikachu, Bolt Tackle, let's break them up. Pikachu became a comet of pure electricity, slamming into the center of the Mytiana pack. The Dark-type Pokémon were sent flying, but the charge also sent them scattering in all directions, directly through the area Garchomp had been meant to contain. Cynthia's carefully laid trap was ruined. She shot Ash a look of pure frustration. Gardevoir, use Psychic to lift those vendor carts and form a barricade. Diantha directed, trying to create safe zones for the fleeing civilians. Gardevoir's eyes glowed, and a dozen heavy carts lifted into the air, moving to form a wall. Hawlucha, I choose you. Use high jump kick on that crocodile. Ash yelled, throwing another Pokeball. His wrestling Pokémon appeared mid-air, diving feet first toward the massive ground type that was tearing up the plaza. Hawlucha was fast and powerful, but its trajectory took it right through the space where Diantha's barricade was being formed. To avoid a collision, Gardevoir had to drop two of the carts, leaving a gaping hole in the defensive line that a group of Purifiers immediately exploited. Ash, watch your positioning. Diantha called out, her voice strained. You're disrupting our control of the field. We don't have time for control. We have to hit them hard and fast. Ash yelled back, recalling Hawlucha and sending out his Infernape. Infernape, Flare Blitz. The fire monkey exploded into a vortex of flame, charging a group of Purifiers who were cornering city police. The attack was devastatingly effective, but the sheer heat and explosive force of it forced Cynthia's Garchomp to pull back, abandoning its own engagement to avoid the friendly fire. They were a whirlwind of destructive power, but they were disjointed. Three solo artists forced to play in a band, each one trying to play their own song louder than the others. They were powerful, but they were not a team. And the purifiers, though weaker, were coordinated, pressing their advantage, their corrupted Pokémon relentlessly advancing. A purifier commander, a tall woman with a cruel sneer, saw her opening. She pointed a finger at a section of the crowd huddled behind Gardevoir's faltering light screen. The weak cling to their chains. Scolipede, Megahorn. Break them. A massive, corrupted Scolipede, its eyes glowing with a maddening purple light, reared up, its horn glowing with a terrifying green energy. It was 20 feet from a group of terrified children and their parents. Diantha saw it. Her face went pale. Gardevoir, intercept. Gardevoir teleported in front of the Scolipede, throwing up a desperate protect. The Megahorn slammed into the green barrier with the force of a freight train. The shield cracked, splintering like glass. Gardevoir cried out, thrown backward. It wouldn't be able to stop a second charge. Cynthia was pinned down, her Garchomp engaged with two corrupted Haxorus that fought with a berserker's fury. She couldn't disengage in time. For one horrifying second, it looked like they were going to fail. That they were going to watch innocent people get hurt on their watch. It was in that moment of impending disaster that Ash's mind went perfectly, terrifyingly clear. The shouts, the explosions, the screams, it all faded into a silent, strategic map in his head. He saw the Scolipede preparing its second charge. He saw Cynthia's position, Diantha's Gardevoir struggling to recover. He saw the battlefield not as a series of individual fights, but as a single, interconnected system. And he saw the opening. Cynthia, he bellowed, his voice cutting through the din with absolute authority. Dragon Rush. Now. Don't pin the Haxorus, push them. Aim for the pier. Cynthia's eyes widened. It was a reckless, aggressive, all-or-nothing command. Her style was to contain and dismantle. Ash was telling her to use her most powerful Pokémon as a battering ram. But there was no time to question. She saw the logic in the chaos. With a sharp nod, she relayed the order. Garchomp roared, cloaking itself in a dragon-shaped aura, and instead of outmaneuvering the Haxorus, it slammed into them head-on, sending all three of them careening towards the edge of the pier. Diantha. Ash roared, not waiting for the outcome. The rubble from Crocodile. Lift it. Make a wall behind me. Diantha didn't hesitate. Her argument from the night before about control felt like a distant memory. This was survival. Gardevoir, do it. Gardevoir's eyes glowed, and huge chunks of shattered pavement and twisted metal ripped from the ground, flying through the air to form a crude, solid barrier just behind Ash. He had just created a clear lane and secured his own rear in the space of 2 seconds. The Scolipede was charging, its horn aimed at the children. Ash was already moving. Pikachu, with me. He didn't need to say anything else. He and his partner were one. Ash ran forward, and Pikachu sprinted alongside him, a yellow blur against the gray stone. Use the wall. Springboard. Ash yelled. Pikachu leaped onto the freshly made rubble wall, using its angled surface as a ramp to launch himself into the air. He soared over Scolipede's head, just as it was about to reach the civilians. Iron tail on its head. Drive it down. Pikachu's tail glowed with a metallic sheen as he descended, spinning like a drill. He slammed his tail directly between the Scolipede's eyes. The corrupted Pokémon shrieked in pain and fury, its charge faltering, its head forced down toward the ground. Infernape, Mach Punch. Garchomp, Stone Edge. Gardevoir, Moonblast. All of you. Now. Ash commanded, his voice the unquestioned center of the storm. It was a symphony of destruction. Infernape appeared in a blur, its fist slamming into Scolipede's exposed flank. From the pier's edge, Garchomp, having shoved the Haxorus into the water, stomped its foot, and pillars of glowing rock erupted from the ground, impaling the Scolipede. And from across the plaza, a dazzling beam of pink fairy energy slammed into the giant bug, engulfing it in a beautiful, terrible explosion. The combined assault was overwhelming. The scallopede collapsed, the purple light in its eyes sputtering out, leaving it unconscious. For the first time, they hadn't just attacked. They had fought together. A new rhythm was established. Ash's chaotic, instinctive commands became the tempo. Cynthia's Garchomp stopped containing and started driving, herding enemies into kill zones. Diantha's Gardevoir stopped defending and started controlling the battlefield itself, manipulating the environment to create openings and traps on Ash's call. Their three distinct styles, once a liability, were now being woven together into something new, something unstoppable. The purifiers, so disciplined moments before, were now in disarray. Their mindless Pokémon were being dismantled by a coordinated force they couldn't comprehend. The commander watched, her face pale with shock. This wasn't a politician and his 2 trophies. This was a monster with 3 heads. Retreat, she shrieked, realizing the battle was lost. Fall back. Vanish. As one, the purifiers threw down smoke pellets. Thick, black smoke flooded the plaza. By the time it cleared, they were gone. The only things left were the unconscious, corrupted Pokémon, the widespread damage, and the 3 trainers standing in the middle of it all. The aftermath was a strange, surreal quiet. The air was thick with dust and the smell of ozone and smoke. The sounds of sirens grew in the distance, but for a moment. The Unity Pier was an island of stillness in a city scrambling to respond. Ash stood, chest heaving, his body thrumming with leftover adrenaline. Pikachu slumped onto his shoulder, utterly spent. Cynthia recalled her Garchomp with a quiet word of praise, her hand lingering on the Pokeball. Diantha was already moving through the dazed civilians, her Gardevoir offering calming waves of psychic energy, her own movie star dress now smudged with dirt and torn at the hem. Her poise was gone, replaced by a raw, immediate concern. When she was sure everyone was safe, she walked back to Ash and Cynthia. The 3 of them stood in a loose triangle amidst the rubble, the evidence of their chaotic, then unified, power all around them. The tension from the night before felt like a lifetime ago. Cynthia was the first to speak, her voice lacking its usual clinical detachment. She was looking at Ash, her gray eyes filled with a complex mixture of astonishment and something else. Something that looked like respect. "Your strategy," she said, her voice quiet but clear over the approaching sirens. "While reckless, was undeniably effective. You don't just see the next move. You see the entire board, all at once." Ash just shrugged, a weary grin on his face. "You just gotta see where everyone needs to be. It's like a 6-on-6 battle, but bigger." Diantha came to a stop in front of him. Her perfect makeup was slightly smudged, a strand of hair had fallen across her face, and she looked more real, more human, than Ash had ever seen her. The actress was gone. The champion remained. She reached out and brushed a speck of soot from his cheek. The gesture was small, simple, and more genuine than any of her practiced smiles. "Thank you, Ash," she said, her voice soft. And for the first time, her smile reached her eyes. It was a tired smile, a relieved smile, but it was real. "You were right. Sometimes, the script needs to be thrown away." Ash looked between the 2 of them. The unreadable strategist and the untouchable star. He saw them now not as political partners or obstacles, but as allies. Comrades. They had faced the fire together and hadn't broken. He offered them both a bottle of water from a nearby refreshment stand that had somehow survived the carnage. They accepted without a word. As they stood there, catching their breath in the wreckage of the Unity Tour's grand debut, a new, unspoken unity was forged. Not in the sterile halls of a political chamber, but here, in the dust and the chaos. The Monarch's charter had bound them by law. The Battle of Castelia had bound them in blood and sweat and respect. And as the city's emergency services finally arrived, the three of them faced the flashing lights, no longer as three individuals, but as a single, united front. Chapter 3, Echoes of the Null. The aftermath of the battle was a controlled, cacophonous hum. Sirens wailed, but their urgency was tempered by the methodical work of Castilia's emergency services. Medics tended to the few minor injuries in the crowd, police cordoned off the pier, and League officials, clad in their crisp, dark suits, moved through the scene with an air of managed crisis. They spoke into communication devices, their faces grim, trying to spin a terrorist attack into a successful defense by the world's new leadership. Ash, Cynthia, and Diantha stood near the ruined stage, a quiet island in the sea of activity. They had given their preliminary statements, a concise, unified report that gave Surdar's political machinery nothing to grasp onto. There were no conflicting stories, no blame, no daylight between them. A portly, flustered-looking official named Bexley approached them, wiping his brow with a handkerchief despite the cool sea breeze. Ahem. Monarch Ketchum, champions, a deplorable incident. Deplorable. However, your swift, coordinated response was exemplary. The chairman's office is already drafting a statement highlighting the effectiveness of the Monarch's charter in action. Diantha gave him a smile. That was razor-thin. How fortunate for the chairman that this attack provided such a perfect proof of concept. Bexley flushed, stammering, I only mean to say, Cynthia stepped forward, holding up a small, sealed evidence bag. Inside was a piece of scorched gray fabric, torn from a purifier's uniform during the fight. The angular, broken circle emblem was clearly visible. This symbol. Is it in any League database? Bexley squinted at it. Not to my knowledge, champion. Our intelligence division is already running it, but it appears to be new. A splinter group, perhaps. Fanatics. They were too coordinated to be simple fanatics, Cynthia stated, her voice flat and final. She turned her back on the official, a clear dismissal. Her focus was now on Ash and Diantha. They used corrupted Pokemon as weapons, but their primary goal was psychological. They attacked a symbol of unity. This was a declaration. Ash nodded, his gaze distant. He was replaying the battle in his mind, but not the strategy. He was remembering the look in the Pokemon's eyes. The Scolipede, the Mytiana, it wasn't just anger. It was agony. They were puppets, their strings pulled by an unseen master, their bodies forced to fight while their spirits screamed. Whatever they did to those Pokemon, Ash said, his voice low and hard, it was wrong. They weren't just being controlled. They were being hollowed out. Diantha looked from Ash's haunted expression to Cynthia's analytical frown. The glamour of the tour, the political games, it had all been burned away. This was real. We can't wait for the League's intelligence division to file a report. Surdar will use this to his advantage, but he'll move slowly, cautiously. These people won't. I agree, Cynthia said. We need to move faster. We need to understand who they are, what they want, and most importantly, how they are inducing this state in Pokemon. The three of them looked at each other. The unspoken question hung in the air. How? Their official duties had them shackled to a schedule of galas and press conferences. Ash was the one who broke the silence, his old restlessness surging back, now channeled into a sharp, focused point. Then we split up. Cynthia and Diantha turned to him. We can cover more ground that way, he explained, the plan forming as he spoke. They'll be expecting us to stick together for the tour. It's the perfect cover. We do what we need to do, and meet up and share what we've found. No one else. Just us. Cynthia considered it. The logic was sound. A decentralized investigation would be harder to track and harder to sabotage. A viable strategy. My resources are in Sinnoh. The Celestic Town historical archives contain texts that predate the modern League. If this symbol has ancient roots, I will find them there. Diantha nodded, her mind already working. And my network is global. I can make discreet inquiries that the League cannot. I have contacts in finance, media, even the entertainment black market. If this group is well funded, as their equipment suggests, they've left a trail. I'll find it. That left Ash. He looked out at the water, his frustration with books and data a palpable thing. He wasn't a scholar or a spy. He was a trainer. His connection was with Pokemon, with the world itself. There was that energy spike, he said, thinking back to Surdar's speech. The thing that had started all of this. The one the committee has been monitoring. Before the tournament, Professor Oak mentioned one of the strongest readings was in Hoenn, near the Cave of Origin. He met their eyes, his conviction solidifying. That's where I'll go. If they're hurting Pokemon, maybe the source of it all left a scar on the land itself. I'll know it when I see it. It was a plan born of instinct, not evidence, but neither of them questioned it. They had seen his instincts in action. They had learned to trust them. Agreed, Cynthia said. We use the tour as our cover. We'll need to arrange transport. Discreetly. Leave that to me, Diantha said, a glint in her eye. She was already pulling out her private data pad. I know a pilot who owes me a favor. He's very good at flying under the radar. Literally. The official, Bexley, watched from a distance as the Monarch and his two fiancées stood close together, talking in low, serious tones. He saw it as a perfect photo opportunity, a symbol of their united resolve. He had no idea he was watching a war council plan their first covert operation. The Celestic Town Historical Research Center was less a library and more a tomb of knowledge. It was a cold, silent place, filled with the scent of ancient paper and preservation agents. The air was still and heavy with the weight of centuries. Sunlight struggled to pierce the thick, leaded glass windows, falling in dusty shafts across towering shelves groaning with scrolls and leather-bound tomes. Cynthia felt at home here. The quiet focus, the scholarly pursuit, this was her natural element, far more than any grand ballroom or political stage. She sat at a large oak table in the center of the main archive, a dozen fragile, priceless texts spread out before her. Her grandmother, Professor Carolina, sat opposite, carefully translating a set of crumbling Sinahan pictographs. Anything? Cynthia asked, not looking up from a faded map of the warring regions. Whispers and shadows, Carolina murmured, her magnifying glass hovering over a symbol. There are many cults and factions from that era who sought to control legendary Pokemon. Most of them used symbols of crowns, chains, or stylized claws. Power, subjugation, control. It's a common theme. She sighed, setting the glass down. Nothing that matches your broken circle. Cynthia pushed a book away in frustration. It feels modern. The design is too clean, too graphic. But the ideology. Severing the false bonds, that feels ancient. Primal. For hours, they worked in silence, a well-practiced team. Cynthia cross-referenced League historical records with regional folklore, while Carolina delved into the more esoteric, mythological texts. They found records of groups that worshipped legendaries, groups that hunted them, but none that preached this strange philosophy of cleansing. The sun had begun to set, painting the dusty air in hues of orange and purple, when Carolina made a soft, sharp intake of breath. Cynthia. Look at this. Cynthia moved to her grandmother's side. Carolina was pointing at a page in a book bound in dark, unmarked hide. It was one of the forbidden texts, a collection of heretical cosmologies and suppressed myths that the early League had ordered sealed away. The page detailed a creation myth entirely at odds with the accepted lore of Arceus and the creation trio. This myth didn't start with an egg in a sea of chaos. It started with two opposing, co-equal forces. The first was will, the drive to create, to shape, to connect. The second was its opposite, absence. The drive to unmake, to erase, to be empty. The myth claimed that will, which would later be embodied by Arceus, won the initial struggle and shaped the universe, but that absence was not destroyed. It was merely pushed back. Made dormant. A silent, patient emptiness waiting for its chance to reclaim creation. Fascinating, but it's just a myth, Cynthia said, though a shiver went down her spine. Look at the symbol they used for absence, Carolina whispered, her finger tracing the drawing. It was crude, ancient, and utterly unmistakable. An angular, broken circle. Cynthia stared, her blood running cold. It was a perfect match for the emblem on the purifier's uniform. The Great Nothing, she read the text aloud, her voice barely a whisper. An entity of pure entropy. The lore calls it the Null. The name felt heavy, dangerous. It was not the name of a Pokémon or a human faction. It was the name of a fundamental, cosmic force. A force that opposed the very existence of bonds, of connection, of life itself. Her datapad chimed, a secure, encrypted signal. It was the time she, Ash, and Diantha had agreed to check in. Her hand trembled slightly as she accepted the call. She had found a route, but it was deeper and darker than she could have ever imagined. While Cynthia was buried in the past, Diantha was navigating the treacherous currents of the present. In a secure, soundproofed room in the Kalos League headquarters, she conducted her own investigation. Her weapon was not a sword, but a network, a web of influence spun over a decade of fame and power. She moved from one secure call to the next with fluid grace. First, she spoke to Stephen Stone in Hoenn, not as a champion, but as a fellow scion of a powerful family. "Stephen, darling, I need you to look into something for me," she said, her tone light and friendly. "A list of recent, large-scale acquisitions of restricted technologies. High-energy shielding, advanced communication jammers, that sort of thing. And do be a dear and keep it off the official league channels. This is a personal matter." Stephen, ever the professional, agreed without question. He understood the subtext. Next, she called an old contact, a former stunt coordinator from her action movie days who now ran a private security firm with a reputation for hiring ex-military trainers with flexible morals. "Marco, I need information," she said, her voice dropping the public warmth for a tone of brisk business. "A new group, highly disciplined, using gray uniforms with a broken circle emblem. They're recruiting. I want to know from where, and who's paying the bills. The usual fee, plus a significant bonus for speed and discretion." Marco, a grizzled man with a face like a roadmap, grunted his affirmation. "You got it, D. I'll put my best people on it. I'll have something for you by morning." Her final call was the most delicate. It was to a man known only as the Curator, an information broker who operated out of the Lumio City art world's shadowy underbelly. He dealt not in paintings, but in secrets. "I am looking for a ghost," Diantha said, her image a cool, collected silhouette on his screen. A name associated with radical anti-bond philosophy. Someone with the expertise to create the kind of psychic interference we saw in Castelia. Someone who would have a reason to hate the very idea of a human-Pokemon partnership. The curator was silent for a long moment, the only sound the faint tinkle of ice in his glass. "That is a very specific, and very dangerous, piece of information, champion. I am prepared to pay for its acquisition," Diantha replied coolly. "Transferring the usual access codes to your account now." A confirmation beeped on her console. The curator smiled, a thin, predatory expression. "Very well. The name you are looking for is not in any active file. He is a ghost, as you say. He scrubbed himself from the world a decade ago. But nothing is ever truly erased." He tapped a few keys. A heavily redacted file appeared on Diantha's screen. Most of it was blacked out, but a grainy photo and a single paragraph remained. The photo was of a young, intense-looking man with dark, burning eyes, standing beside a much-lauded research project. "His name is Malachi," the curator said. He was once a rising star in the field of Pokémon psychic neurology. He believed that the bond between a trainer and a Pokémon could be mapped, quantified, even amplified. He was a true believer in partnership. Until the incident. What incident? Diantha pressed. The file is sealed at the highest level of the league. All I know are the rumors. He was part of a research team on a remote island, studying a legendary Pokémon. Something went wrong. A catastrophic psychic event. The entire research team was wiped out. Malachi was the sole survivor. He was found catatonic, surrounded by nothing. The Pokémon was gone. The equipment was gone. He claimed the legendary had betrayed them, that it had unmade his colleagues, erasing them from existence. He said the bond itself was a lie, a cosmic flaw that gave Pokémon the power to consume their human partners. Diantha stared at the file. A man driven mad by trauma, with the genius-level intellect to turn his broken philosophy into a weapon. No one believed him, the curator continued with a shrug. He was institutionalized. He escaped. And vanished. Until now, it would seem. Diantha ended the call, the name echoing in her mind. Malachi. A man who had once tried to perfect the bond, now seeking to destroy it completely. She had the who. Cynthia had the what. She looked at the clock. It was time for their check-in. She wondered what the final piece of the puzzle, Ash's piece, would be. The air in the Hoenese highlands was wrong. Ash felt at the moment he and Pikachu stepped off the small, unmarked cargo plane Diantha had arranged. It was supposed to be a region teeming with life, a place of vibrant nature. But here, in the desolate plains east of the Cave of Origin, there was only silence. There were no cheerful calls of Taillow and Swellow. There was no rustling of Zigzagoon in the tall grass. The wind itself seemed dead, carrying no scent of flowers or damp earth. It was a sterile, unnerving quiet that made the hairs on Ash's arms stand up. Something's really not right here, buddy, Ash murmured. Pikachu, on his shoulder, let out a low, uneasy growl, his cheeks sparking nervously. Ash followed his instincts, a compass of intuition pointing him towards the source of the wrongness. He walked for nearly an hour, the silence pressing in on him. He passed petrified trees, their bark gray and brittle, and crossed a dry, cracked riverbed where the water should have been flowing. It felt like the life was being slowly, methodically leached out of the very land. Then he saw it. In the distance, a structure of ancient, cyclopean stone rose from the barren plain. It was a ruin, one of the many that dotted Hoenn's landscape, rumored to be a resting place for one of the legendary golems. But its shape was distorted. Part of the ruin had collapsed, and as Ash got closer, he realized it hadn't fallen. It had been smashed. Huge blocks of carved stone were scattered like pebbles, the destruction fresh and violent. And in the center of the ruin, a titanic figure was moving. It was Regirock. But it was a Regirock twisted into a nightmare of its former self. Its rock-hard body, usually a symbol of unyielding fortitude, was cracked with pulsating veins of black and purple energy. Its movements were not the slow, deliberate actions of a guardian, they were jerky, spasmodic, filled with a terrible, self-destructive rage. Its single eye, usually a calm pattern of dots, was a swirling vortex of purple light. It wasn't guarding the ruin. It was systematically destroying it. With a guttural roar that was more a shriek of pain, it slammed its massive stone fist into one of the remaining pillars, shattering it into dust. "What did they do to you?" Ash whispered in horror. This was the source of the silence. This was the scar on the land. A legendary guardian, corrupted and turned into a weapon of desecration against its own home. Ash didn't think. He reacted. "Pikachu, we have to stop it before it hurts itself anymore." Thunderbolt. A powerful bolt of lightning shot from Pikachu's cheeks and slammed into Regirock's back. The golem roared, staggering, but it didn't seem to feel pain. The purple energy flared brighter. It turned, its movements unnaturally fast, and fired a hyper beam. Ash and Pikachu dove out of the way just as the beam of energy vaporized the ground where they had been standing. It's too strong, and it's not listening to reason. Ash gritted his teeth. This was like the Pokémon in Castelia, but 100 times worse. The corruption ran deep, twisting the legendary's very core. Okay, new plan. We have to incapacitate it. Lucario, I choose you. His aura-wielding Pokémon appeared, immediately sensing the disturbance. The pain is immense, Ash. It is, Hollow, I know. We have to stop it, gently if we can, Ash said. Aura Sphere. Aim for its legs. Lucario fired a focused ball of blue energy. It struck Regirock's leg, causing it to stumble. But instead of falling, the golem let out another agonized roar and unleashed a stone edge. Jagged, glowing pillars of rock erupted from the ground all around them, forcing them to scatter. They fought for 10 minutes, a desperate, frustrating battle. Every attack they landed, every attempt to subdue the rampaging golem, only seemed to make it more frenzied. Its attacks became wilder, more powerful. It was feeding on the conflict, the violent energy fueling its corruption. Pikachu was panting, Lucario was bruised, and Ash knew, with a sinking feeling, that they were losing. Worse, he knew they were making it worse. He watched as Regirock raised its fist to smash the final, central altar of its own ruin. He saw the pained, jerky motion, heard the tortured cry. And something inside him clicked. This wasn't a battle to be won. This was a rescue. Stop, he said, his voice quiet but firm. Both of you. Stand down. Lucario looked at him, confused. Pikachu chirped in protest, his cheeks sparking defiantly. It will not stop, Ash, Lucario projected. We're not fighting it anymore, Ash said, his eyes fixed on the suffering golem. We can't beat this thing from the outside. We have to fight what's on the inside. He took a deep breath, closing his eyes. He reached out, not with his fists or his Pokémon's attacks, but with his spirit. With his aura. It was a technique he hadn't used often, a deep, draining form of empathy that he had only touched upon in times of great need. He let his own defenses down, opening himself up to the whirlwind of pain and chaos emanating from Regirock. The moment he made contact, it hit him like a physical blow. It was an emptiness. A vast, terrifying, soul-crushingly cold emptiness. It was a hunger that didn't want to eat, but to unmake. It was the feeling of a bond being shredded, of identity being erased, of existence being a mistake. He felt Regirock's ancient duty, its eons of silent guardianship, being devoured by this, nothingness. The purple light was not a power source, it was the visible sign of an absence, a void where Regirock's spirit should have been. Give up, a voice that was not a voice whispered in his mind. The bond is a flaw. Connection is pain. Let go. Be empty. Be free, the void tried to latch onto him, to pull him in, to convince him of its cold, simple truth. For a terrifying second, Ash felt his own energy, his own bonds, starting to fray. No. He gritted his teeth, sweat beading on his forehead. He pushed back. He didn't fight the void with anger or power. He fought it with presence. He flooded the connection with everything he was. He poured his memories, his feelings, his very essence into the link. He sent the feeling of Pikachu's fur, the warmth of Infernape's flame, the loyalty in Lucario's heart. He sent the memory of winning the Alola League, the joy on his friends' faces. He sent the taste of his mom's cooking, the pride in Professor Oak's eyes, the grudging respect he had just earned from Cynthia and Diantha. He filled the cold, empty space with the messy, vibrant, chaotic, and beautiful reality of connection. He screamed, the effort immense, a silent, spiritual war being waged in the space of a heartbeat. You are not empty. You are a guardian. You have a purpose. For a moment, the void held. Then, with a sound like shattering glass that only he could hear, the wave of life and love and loyalty he had unleashed was too much. The cold, simple lie of the void could not stand against the complex, overwhelming truth of the bond. The purple light in Regirock's veins flickered, shattered, and dissolved into nothing. The jerky, pained movements ceased. The golem stood still, its fist frozen in mid-air, inches from its own altar. The swirling vortex in its eye faded, returning to the calm, familiar pattern of dots. It slowly lowered its arm. The silence that returned was different. It was no longer the dead, sterile silence of the void. It was the natural, peaceful silence of the ancient stones. Ash collapsed to his knees, gasping for air, his body trembling. The effort had left him utterly drained, more exhausted than any physical battle ever had. Lucario and Pikachu rushed to his side, nudging him with concern. "I'm okay," he panted. "Just tired." He looked up. The colossal stone golem took a slow, deliberate step towards him. It knelt, a movement that shook the very ground. Then, with a gentleness that seemed impossible for such a creature, it extended its massive, rock-hewn hand. It did not touch him. It simply held its hand open before him, a gesture of profound, silent gratitude. Ash, with Pikachu and Lucario's help, got to his feet. He reached out and placed his own hand against the cool, ancient stone. He felt no pain, no emptiness. Only a deep, quiet strength. A duty restored. His datapad chimed. It was time. He looked at the peaceful golem, then at the healing land around them. He finally had his piece of the puzzle. 3 faces, holograms flickering in their respective locations, stared at each other from across the world. Cynthia, in her dusty Sinnoh archive. Diantha, in her sleek Kalos command center. And Ash, sitting on a rock in the now peaceful Hoenn Highlands, looking exhausted but resolute. "My turn first," Ash said, his voice hoarse. He quickly recounted his experience, the dead landscape, the corrupted Regirock, the battle. It wasn't just being controlled. There was this feeling. An emptiness. It was cold, and it felt like it was trying to erase Regirock from the inside out. It told me that bonds were a lie. That connection was pain. In Sinnoh. Cynthia's eyes widened. She held her datapad up to her camera, showing a high-resolution image of the symbol from the heretical text. "Ash," she said, her voice filled with a new, dreadful gravity. "I think I know what you felt. The symbol the purifiers use, it's thousands of years old. It's from a forbidden creation myth. It represents a pre-creation entity, an opposing force to Arceus itself." She took a deep, steadying breath. The texts call it, the Great Nothing. An avatar of pure entropy, whose only purpose is to unmake creation by dissolving the bonds that hold it together. The lore calls it the Null. The name landed with the weight of a fallen star. Ash stared at the broken circle, the symbol of the void he had just fought. Before he could even process it, Diantha spoke, her face pale and grim. "And I have a name for the man who is serving as its herald." She brought up the file on her own screen. The grainy photo of the intense young researcher filled their view. "His name is Malachi," Diantha said, her voice low. "A genius in psychic neurology. He was the sole survivor of a research disaster involving a legendary Pokémon years ago. He claims the Pokémon betrayed him, that it used its bond to unmake his team. He became obsessed with the idea that the link between humans and Pokémon is a cosmic flaw, a parasitic corruption." She looked at them, her carefully constructed composure gone, replaced by the stark reality of their discovery. "He's not just a fanatic leading a cult. He's a brilliant, traumatized man who willingly sought out a cosmic force of annihilation because he believes he's the hero. He believes he's saving the world by tearing it apart." Silence. The 3 threads of their investigation had woven together into a single, terrifying tapestry. The threat wasn't just a political maneuver or a terrorist group. It was a man, a myth, and a monster. A brilliant, broken avatar, wielding the power of a primordial god of nothingness, intent on erasing the very foundation of their world. They looked at each other through the cold light of the holograms, the true weight of their forced alliance finally crashing down upon them. This was their fight now. The Monarch, the Sage, and the Star. United against the echoes of the Null. Chapter 4, The Serpent's Nest. The summons came less than an hour after their sobering revelation. It wasn't a request, it was a command, delivered via a cold, official communiqué from Chairman Serdar's office. An emergency summit was being convened at the Pokémon League headquarters in Winden. All regional champions, Elite Four members, and high-ranking league officials were to be in attendance. The stated purpose, to address the rising threat of the so-called purifiers, and formulate a global response. Ash, sitting on the cargo bay ramp of the plane that was taking him from Hoenn, read the message on his datapad and snorted. Formulate a response. He's had a week. This isn't a strategy session. It's an ambush. Diantha's hologram, projected from the seat across from him, nodded grimly. He's using our own actions against us. The attack in Castelia. Your unsanctioned trip to Hoenn. He will paint you as a reckless, insubordinate monarch who is escalating the crisis. He'll argue that your chaotic methods are a greater threat than the purifiers themselves. He will call for a vote of no confidence, Cynthia's voice added, her own hologram flickering to life beside Diantha's. She was en route from Sinnoh, the background of her projection a blur of motion. The League Charter has provisions for it. If a sitting monarch is deemed unfit or acts in a way that endangers global stability, the assembled champions can vote to temporarily suspend their authority and transfer it to the League Committee. To him. The scope of Serdar's ambition was suddenly, chillingly clear. The Monarch's charter hadn't just been a cage for Ash, it was a trap for all of them. By binding them together, Serdar had ensured that Ash's actions would reflect on them, and their reputations would be used to legitimize his power grab. So, what do we do? Ash asked, the frustration of the situation a familiar, bitter taste. He had just faced down a sliver of cosmic oblivion, and now he had to go play politics with a man who fought with bylaws and procedural violations. We can't just tell them we've uncovered an ancient god of nothingness and its traumatized prophet. They'll think we're insane. Serdar will see to that. No, Cynthia agreed. We cannot reveal the full nature of the threat. The panic would be catastrophic. And Malachi remains a ghost. We have no concrete evidence to present, only the word of a black market information broker. Then we beat Serdar at his own game, Diantha said, a flicker of her on-stage fire returning to her eyes. He wants to fight in the political arena. Fine. But he thinks he's fighting a lone, undisciplined boy. He's not. He's fighting us. The plane began its descent, the lights of Winden spreading out below like a fallen constellation. The Pokémon League headquarters, a towering spire of glass and steel that dwarfed even the surrounding skyscrapers, was a beacon in the center of the city. It was a monument to order, process, and control. It was Serdar's home turf. The Serpent's Nest. This is a different kind of battle, Ash, Diantha said, her voice serious. There are no thunderbolts or dragon claws here. The weapons are words, perception, and procedure. I'm not good at that, Ash stated bluntly. It wasn't an admission of defeat, it was a statement of fact. You don't have to be, Cynthia's voice cut in, firm and reassuring. Diantha is the master of perception. I am the master of procedure. We will be your shield. All you have to do is be the one thing Serdar can never be. What's that? Ash asked. A small, rare smile touched Cynthia's lips. Honest. The hours before the summit were a whirlwind of intense, focused preparation. They met in the same sterile suite where they had first been thrust together, but the atmosphere was completely different. The awkward tension was gone, replaced by the focused energy of a battle team planning their strategy. The room was their war camp. Diantha, who had arrived first, had already transformed it. A holographic map of the summit hall was projected in the center of the room, displaying seating arrangements and camera placements. Profiles of every attending champion and official were queued up on a nearby screen. "Alright, Ash, listen closely," Diantha began, pacing like a director blocking a scene. "The key to this is controlling the narrative from the moment we enter. We cannot look divided. We will walk in together, in sync. Cynthia, you'll be on his right. Your presence projects authority and gravitas. I'll be on his left. I'll handle the press. Ash, you are the center. You walk with purpose. Head up, shoulders back. You are not a challenger here. You are the monarch. You own the room." Ash tried to mimic the posture, feeling stiff and unnatural. "I feel like a robot." "You look like a leader," Diantha corrected sharply. "Now, the questions. They will come fast and they will be hostile. The media will have been pre-briefed by Serdar's office. They will ask about Castelia first." Cynthia took over, her tone that of a professor drilling a star pupil. "When they ask why you engaged the purifiers directly instead of letting local authorities handle it, you will not mention the limpet mine or the speed of the attack. You will state that as monarch, your primary duty is the protection of civilians, and you took the most direct course of action to prevent loss of life. You will use the phrase, decisive action. It's a key term from the League's own leadership doctrines. Serdar's people wrote them. I will then interject." She pulled up a file on her datapad. "I will cite the legendary disturbance protocol, Section 4. Paragraph B, which grants champions and, by extension, the monarch, executive authority to act unilaterally in the event of a crisis involving abnormally aggressive Pokémon behavior. The Purifier's corrupted Pokémon fall under that definition. It will cut Serdar's procedural argument off at the knees." Ash blinked. "There's a rule for that?" "There's a rule for everything, Ash," Cynthia said dryly. "The trick is knowing which ones to use." Diantha stepped in again. "Next, they will come for your trip to Hoenn. They will call it an unauthorized excursion. They'll paint you as a rogue agent. That's my cue." Her eyes glinted. "I will state that your trip was a coordinated intelligence-gathering mission, sanctioned by both myself and Champion Cynthia. I'll talk about our new, dynamic triad of leadership and our proactive approach to global security. I will bury them in so much positive press release jargon they won't know which way is up. It will turn Serdar's accusation of recklessness into proof of our effectiveness." They went on like this for 2 hours. It was more intense than any training battle Ash had ever endured. Cynthia armed him with facts, laws, and historical precedents. Diantha coached him on tone, body language, and delivery. They were forging a defense for him, piece by piece, out of their own unique strengths. He was the sword, and they were the armor, the shield, and the strategic map. Finally, Ash held up a hand. Okay, I get it. I'll try to remember all of that. But what happens when Serdar gets past all of this? What happens when he puts me on the spot and asks me to explain myself in front of everyone?" Cynthia and Diantha looked at each other. The scripting and strategy could only take them so far. There would come a moment when it would just be Ash, alone in the spotlight. "That," Diantha said, her voice softer, "is when you stop performing. You stop reciting our lines. You just talk. Tell them what you told us. Tell them what you saw in Hoenn. Tell them the truth," Cynthia finished. "Your truth is your greatest weapon. It is the one thing he cannot script or strategize against." Ash looked at the two of them, the brilliant strategist and the charismatic star, both of whom were now putting their reputations, their careers, on the line for him. A wave of gratitude, so strong it almost buckled his knees, washed over him. "Okay," he said, his voice quiet but firm. Okay. Let's go. The summit hall was a marvel of modern architecture and a temple to institutional power. A vast, circular chamber with tiered seating that descended to a central podium. Every seat was filled. The champions were all there, Lance of Kanto and Giotto, his expression grim, his cape a slash of red against the hall's muted blues and grays, Stephen Stone of Hoenn, looking cool and analytical in his impeccable suit, Iris of Unova, restless and radiating a nervous energy, Gita of Paldea, her face an unreadable mask of calm observation. The rest of the seats were filled with Elite Four members, gym leaders, and the gray-suited functionaries of the league bureaucracy. When the doors opened, a hush fell over the hall. Ash, Cynthia, and Diantha entered, just as they had practiced. They moved as one unit, a synchronized display of power and purpose. Ash walked with a confidence he didn't entirely feel, but the solid presence of Cynthia on his right and the graceful calm of Diantha on his left anchored him. They were a fortress, and he was its heart. They took their seats on the raised dais, in the 3 thrones reserved for the monarch and his chosen partners. Serdar was already at the central podium, looking out over the assembly with an air of somber authority. He waited for them to be seated, letting the silence stretch, building the tension. "We are gathered here today," Serdar began, his voice resonating through the chamber's perfect acoustics, "because our world is in peril. A new, violent faction threatens our peace, and our leadership's response has been questionable." His gaze flicked to Ash. It was the opening salvo. In Castelia City, a situation that should have been handled by local law enforcement was escalated into a full-scale battle by our new monarch, resulting in significant property damage and public panic. A reporter from a major network, clearly pre-selected, stood up. "Monarch Ketchum, can you respond to allegations that your direct intervention was a reckless overreach of your authority?" Ash took a breath. He felt Diantha's subtle, encouraging nod. He stood. "My primary duty as monarch is the safety of people and Pokemon," he said, his voice steady and clear, just as they had rehearsed. "When I saw civilians in immediate danger, I took decisive action to neutralize the threat. Any delay would have resulted in injury, or worse." Before the reporter could ask a follow-up, Cynthia stood beside him. "I should also add," she said, her voice carrying an unshakable authority, "that the monarch's actions were in complete accordance with the legendary disturbance protocol, Section 4. The use of Pokemon exhibiting abnormally aggressive behavior, as the Purifier's Pokemon clearly were, constitutes a crisis that grants the monarch executive authority to act. There was no procedural violation." A murmur went through the champions section. Lance nodded slightly, his expression thoughtful. Serdar's first attack had been perfectly, legally parried. His thin lips tightened. Be that as it may, Serdar pressed on, changing tack. The monarch then proceeded to abandon his official duties on the Unity Tour to embark on a personal, unsanctioned excursion to the Hoenn region, leaving his partners and his security detail behind. This level of impulsiveness is not just irresponsible, it is a danger to the very office he holds. Another reporter stood. "Champion Diantha, how do you respond to the monarch abandoning you in the middle of your first official tour? Does this not show a fundamental lack of respect for the charter and for you and Champion Cynthia?" Diantha rose, a picture of grace under pressure. She gave the reporter a dazzling, disarming smile. "There seems to be a misunderstanding," she said, her voice smooth as honey. "The monarch did not abandon us. His trip to Hoenn was a crucial, pre-planned intelligence-gathering mission, sanctioned and coordinated by all 3 of us." She gestured between herself, Ash, and Cynthia. "We are pioneering a new, dynamic form of leadership. A proactive triad. While I was leveraging my network to identify the financial backing of the Purifiers and Champion Cynthia was researching their historical origins, Monarch Ketchum was on the ground, investigating the source of the energy disturbances Serdar himself spoke of. His mission was a complete success." She made it sound like a triumph, a masterstroke of strategy. The narrative Serdar had tried to build, of a reckless boy and his 2 abandoned fiancées, crumbled. In its place was an image of a powerful, coordinated team. Serdar's face, for the first time, showed a flicker of frustration. He was losing control of the room. He decided to go for the throat. A success. Serdar's voice dripped with scorn. What success? What did this mission accomplish, Monarch? What answers did you bring back that justify this flagrant disregard for protocol? He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush that still carried through the whole hall. Or is it true, as some sources suggest, that you simply instigated a confrontation with a legendary Pokémon for no reason, further destabilizing an already fragile region? This was it. The moment the script ran out. All eyes were on Ash. The champions, the media, the bureaucrats. Waiting. Judging. Ash looked at Cynthia, then at Diantha. He saw their silent encouragement. The truth. He stepped forward, away from the safety of his throne, to the edge of the dais. He wasn't behind a podium. He was just a man, standing before them all. I didn't go to Hoenn to fight a legendary Pokémon, he said, his voice quiet, yet it commanded the attention of the entire room. The practiced, formal tone was gone. This was just him. I went because the land there felt wrong. It was silent. Dead. Like the life was being choked out of it. He looked directly at the other champions, at Lance, at Steven, at Iris. He wasn't speaking to the politicians anymore. He was speaking to them. As trainers. I found Regirock. One of the ancient guardians of Hoenn. But it wasn't guarding anything. It was destroying its own home. And it was in pain. His voice grew stronger, filled with a raw, undeniable emotion. There was something inside it. A coldness. An emptiness that was making it hurt itself. Making it hate what it was. I've seen Pokémon be controlled by evil people before. This was different. This wasn't control. This was erasure. It was trying to unmake it from the inside out. The hall was utterly silent. No one was taking notes. No one was preparing a rebuttal. They were just listening. You ask what I accomplished, Ash said, his gaze sweeping the room. I didn't write a report. I didn't file a motion. I reached out to that Pokémon. I connected with it. And I reminded it what it was. I fought the emptiness not with attacks, but with my bond with my own Pokémon. And I saved it. He took a breath, his eyes blazing with a conviction that was more powerful than any law Cynthia could cite, more persuasive than any performance Diantha could give. Serdar is right about one thing. There's a threat. But it's not a political faction. It's not something you can fight with rules and committees. It's a poison that attacks the very spirit of Pokémon, the bond that all of us in this room have built our lives on. I don't have all the answers. I don't know exactly what this thing is. But I know how to fight it. And I know we are running out of time. He held their gaze, one by one. You can vote to take away my title. You can tie my hands with your procedures and your red tape. Or you can stand with me, and we can fight this thing together. Not as politicians. But as trainers. As champions of a world that needs us now more than ever. He finished. The silence that followed was profound. It wasn't the silence of judgment. It was the silence of 100 powerful, battle-hardened individuals being reminded of the one simple truth that connected them all, their love for Pokémon. Serdar saw the tide turn. He saw the look on Lance's face, the nod from Steven. He saw his ambush, his perfectly constructed political trap, being dismantled by a boy's simple, passionate honesty. In a last, desperate move, he slammed his hand on the podium. This is absurd. He offers no evidence, no plan. Only emotional anecdotes and fear-mongering. He is unfit to lead. I call for the vote. A vote of no confidence in the Monarch. Before anyone could second the motion, a powerful voice boomed from the champion's tier. I will not support such a vote. All heads turned. It was Lance, the Dragon Master, champion of 2 regions, arguably the most respected trainer in the world. He stood, his arms crossed over his chest, his expression like granite. I have known Ash for years. I have seen his methods. They are unorthodox. They are chaotic. But his heart has always been in the right place, and his bond with his Pokémon is second to none. What he describes. I have felt whispers of it myself, on the wind at the Dragon's Denver. A coldness where there should be life. Then another voice, cool and metallic as the steel of his partner. Stephen Stone rose to his feet. The reports from my region confirm Monarch Ketchum's account. There is an unnatural stillness in the eastern highlands. Our geological sensors picked up energy readings that our scientists cannot explain. They called it a null field. Ash's anecdote has given it a face. He looked directly at Sirdar. I would rather put my faith in the man who faced that threat and survived than in a committee that wants to debate it to death. It was an avalanche. With Lance and Stephen backing him, the other champions quickly fell in line. Iris, Geeta, even the typically reserved Wallace of Hoenn, all voiced their support for the Monarch. Sirdar stood at the podium, his face ashen. He was alone. His political maneuvering, his carefully laid plans, his life's work of control and order, all of it had been undone in minutes. He had been so focused on the political game that he had forgotten what truly held power in this room, the profound, unshakable bond between trainer and Pokémon. Ash hadn't played his game. He had simply reminded everyone of the game that truly mattered. The serpent had been defanged. Sirdar sank back into his chair, a defeated man, the glint of power in his eyes replaced by a hollow, bitter humiliation. As the summit was officially adjourned, a motion of confidence in the Monarch passing with a near-unanimous vote, Ash felt a hand on each of his arms. He looked to his right, at Cynthia. She was watching him with an expression of deep, analytical fascination, as if he were a newly discovered legendary she was still trying to understand. To his left, Diantha was beaming, not a performance smile, but a look of genuine pride and elation. That, Diantha said, her voice a low, impressed murmur, was surprisingly effective. Cynthia nodded, her lips curving into a small, true smile. You are a disruptive force, Ash Ketchum. Perhaps that's what we need. They had walked in as a manufactured alliance. They walked out as a team. The political victory, forged in the sterile heart of the serpent's nest, felt as real, as hard-won, and as significant as any battle they had ever faced. And as they left the hall, side by side, they knew that the real fight was only just beginning. Chapter 5, The Heart of Home. The victory at the summit was a strange and hollow thing. They had won the political battle, but the war against the Null had barely begun. The weight of their new knowledge and the scale of the threat ahead settled upon them, a chilling, persistent pressure. They returned to their suite at the Winden Hotel, the adrenaline of the confrontation fading, leaving behind a shared, bone-deep exhaustion. The room, once a war camp, was now just a silent, sterile cage. Diantha sank into an armchair, the vibrant energy she projected in the hall gone, leaving her looking pale and weary. Cynthia stood by the window, her back to the room, her silhouette a stark, lonely figure against the glittering, indifferent city. Ash paced, a restless energy still thrumming through him, a need to do something clashing with the fact that, for the moment, there was nothing to do. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. So, Ash said finally, breaking the quiet. What now? We wait for Malachi to make his next move. We consolidate our position, Cynthia answered, her voice tired. We use the political capital. We've just earned to quietly mobilize the regional champions. We create a covert network, share intelligence. We prepare. It was a sound, logical plan, but it lacked any real warmth, any sense of hope. And we continue the tour, Diantha added with a sigh, rubbing her temples. Sirdar has lost his power, but the charter remains. We still have to play our parts. The next stop is a charity gala in Lumios. More smiles, more handshakes. Her voice was flat, devoid of its usual sparkle. The thought of more performance was clearly draining. Ash stopped pacing. He looked at the two of them. The indomitable strategist looked lost. The radiant star looked burned out. They were all frayed, stretched thin by the weight of their crowns, their new duties, and the cosmic horror they had uncovered. Preparing for the next battle was important, but he realized, with a sudden, startling clarity, that they wouldn't survive it if they were already broken. He thought of green fields. He thought of the smell of his mom's cooking. He thought of the comforting, chaotic symphony of his Pokémon at Professor Oak's lab. He thought of home. No, he said. Both of them turned to look at him. Not yet, he clarified. Before we do any of that, before the next battle, before the next gala, we need a break. A real one. He shoved his hands in his pockets, a sudden, uncharacteristic nervousness making him feel like a kid again. I want you to come with me. To my home. To Pallet Town. The suggestion hung in the air, so simple and unexpected it seemed radical. Cynthia frowned. Ash, we don't have time for a vacation. The intelligence network, it'll wait a day, Ash insisted. What's the point of having all this power if we can't even take a day to breathe? We're running on fumes. We need to recharge. He looked at Diantha. And you need a break from being, Diantha, the champion. And you, he turned to Cynthia, need a break from carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. Just for a little while. He offered a small, hesitant smile. My mom makes the best hot chocolate you've ever tasted. And Professor Oak's lab has more open space than anywhere in this entire city. You can just, be. Diantha stared at him, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. The idea of not having to be anyone, of not having to perform, was both terrifying and intoxicatingly appealing. Cynthia's rigid posture seemed to soften just a fraction. Pallet Town. The cradle of legends. The starting point for so many journeys, including the Monarch's. It held a certain scholarly appeal. It would be, unorthodox, Cynthia murmured, testing the word. All my best plans are, Ash shot back with a grin. Diantha let out a soft, genuine laugh. It was the first one he'd heard from her that wasn't for a camera. All right, Monarch, she said, a real smile finally touching her lips. Lead the way. I confess, I am curious to see where a force of nature like you was forged. Cynthia gave a slow, deliberate nod. A tactical retreat to consolidate our morale, she framed it, her mind already putting it into a strategic context. Very well. I accept. Ash's grin widened. It felt like a bigger victory than the one at the summit. For the first time, this wasn't about the charter or the mission. It was about them. Pallet Town was a breath of fresh air, literally and figuratively. After the oppressive steel and glass of Winden, the small, rustic town felt like stepping into another world. The air smelled of salt from the nearby sea and fresh-cut grass. Modest houses with colorful gardens lined the dirt paths. It was quiet, peaceful, and utterly unassuming. It was impossible to believe that the most powerful trainer in the world had come from such a humble place. As they walked down the main path toward Ash's house, Diantha looked around, her celebrity senses tingling with the sheer lack of scrutiny. No one was staring. No one was pointing. An old man tending his bellsprout just gave them a friendly nod. A group of kids playing with a ball barely gave them a second glance. This is strange, Diantha murmured, pulling the simple sun hat she'd bought at the airport lower. She, like Cynthia, had changed into simple, practical traveling clothes, shedding their champion personas like a second skin. I don't think I've walked down a public street without being recognized since I was 12. Everyone here has known me since I was a baby, Ash explained with a shrug. They're more likely to ask me to help get a Meowth out of a tree than ask for an autograph. Cynthia was observing the unique architecture of Professor Oak's lab in the distance, a thoughtful look on her face. There's a powerful sense of history here. A connection to the land. It's no wonder so many strong trainers start their journeys in Kanto. They reached Ash's house, a modest, two-story home with a well-tended garden in the front. Before Ash could even get his key out, the door flew open. A woman with warm brown eyes and an even warmer smile stood in the doorway, wiping her hands on an apron. It was Delia Ketchum. Her gaze went past Ash to his two companions, and her smile widened. She didn't see two of the most powerful and famous women in the world. She saw her son's friends. "Ash, honey, you're home," she said, pulling him into a fierce hug. "And you brought guests. Oh, it's wonderful to meet you. You must be exhausted from your travels. Come in, come in. I've just put a pot of tea on." She ushered them inside with an easy, disarming warmth that immediately melted through Cynthia's reserved composure and Diantha's lifetime of media training. The house was cozy, filled with the scent of baking and a comfortable, lived-in clutter. Photos lined the mantelpiece, a gap-toothed Ash holding a pollywag, a teenage Ash standing proudly with his Alolan friends, a whole gallery of a life filled with adventure and love. "Mrs. Ketchum, it's an honor to meet you," Diantha began, falling back on her practiced charm. Delia just waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, please, none of that. You're Ash's friends, you call me Delia. Now, you two look like you haven't had a decent meal in a week. Sit, sit. I'll bring out some snacks." She bustled off to the kitchen, leaving Cynthia and Diantha standing awkwardly in the middle of the living room. They were completely out of their element. They could command armies of Pokémon, sway political bodies, and face down gods, but they had no protocol for dealing with this level of unconditional hospitality. Ash just grinned. "Told you." After tea and plates of homemade cookies that Diantha declared a culinary masterpiece, Ash led them out the back door. "Come on. I want you to meet the rest of the family." They walked up a grassy hill to the sprawling expanse of Professor Oak's corral. The moment they crested the hill, the peaceful quiet of Pallet Town was replaced by a joyous, chaotic symphony of sound. The massive, multi-acre ranch was a kaleidoscope of motion and color. Herds of toros thundered across the plains, a massive Snorlax snored contentedly under a tree, and a group of his water types splashed playfully in a large lake. The moment Ash appeared, a cry went up. "Bulbasaur! Crocodile! Infernape!" From every corner of the corral, Pokémon came running, flying, and slithering towards him. It was an avalanche of affection. His massive Torterra lumbered over, nuzzling its head against him so hard he almost fell over. His whole herd of toros, all 30 of them, stampeded towards him, only to come to a screeching halt inches away, vying for a pat on the head. His Charizard, who had been sunning himself on a high cliff, let out a deafening roar of greeting and swooped down, landing with a ground-shaking thud. Cynthia and Diantha stood back, watching in stunned silence. They had seen powerful Pokémon before. They owned powerful Pokémon. But they had never seen this. This wasn't a collection of powerful assets. It was a massive, sprawling, chaotic family, and Ash was its undeniable heart. They saw the sheer, unadulterated joy in the interactions. They watched as Ash roughhoused with his boisterous Incineroar, had a serious, low-toned conversation with his stoic Sceptile, and helped his clumsy Torkoal, who had gotten stuck on its back. Each interaction was unique, personal, and built on a foundation of years of shared history and love. His Charizard, a beast of incredible power who had faced down legendaries, noticed the two newcomers. It fixed them with an intense, intimidating stare, a low growl rumbling in its chest. It took a protective step in front of Ash. Ash just patted its snout. "It's okay, Charizard. They're friends." The dragon looked from Ash to the two women, then back to Ash. After a moment, the growl subsided. It gave them a short, curt nod of acceptance before turning its attention back to its trainer. Diantha let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. He's protective. He's my oldest friend, besides Pikachu, Ash said with a fond smile. He just wants to make sure I'm okay. Cynthia was watching, her analytical mind processing a torrent of new data. She was seeing the source code of Ash's power. It wasn't just the abstract concept of bonds. It was this. This messy, loud, unconditional, and fiercely loyal network of relationships. It was a power that couldn't be measured or quantified, but its strength was undeniable. You don't command them, she observed, her voice filled with a quiet awe. You belong with them. Ash just smiled. Yeah. I guess I do. As dusk settled, casting long shadows across the corral, they sat around a large, crackling bonfire that Professor Oak and Tracy had helped set up. The professor, a living legend in his own right, had greeted the two champions with academic delight, but had then, like Delia, treated them with the simple courtesy of welcomed guests. The frantic energy of the day had mellowed into a comfortable quiet. Ash's Pokémon were scattered around them, dozing in the firelight. The warmth of the flames, the soft chirping of distant cricketot, and the immense, starry sky above created an atmosphere of profound peace. The world of politics and cosmic threats felt a million miles away. It was Diantha who spoke first, her voice soft, her gaze lost in the dancing flames. I haven't felt this, quiet, in a very long time. In my world, silence is just the space between interviews. It's never peaceful. She looked up, her eyes meeting Ash's, then Cynthia's. The firelight stripped away her public persona, leaving something vulnerable and real in its place. My life is a performance. It has been since I was a child. Every smile, every word, every battle, it's for an audience. Sometimes, she admitted, her voice barely a whisper, I forget where the character ends and I begin. I feel more like the idea of Diantha than the person. Cynthia, who had been silently observing, surprised them both by speaking next. Her own walls, it seemed, were beginning to crumble in the disarming honesty of the evening. My burden is not performance, but legacy, she said, her voice low and contemplative. My family has been tied to Sinnoh's history for generations. Scholars, researchers, guardians of the myths. From the moment I could read, I was taught about Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina. The weight of that knowledge, the responsibility to protect it, it's a cage of a different sort. There is no room for error. There is no room for myself. I am the Sinnoh champion. The guardian of history. The rest is secondary. She looked at the fire. It can be a lonely position. They both looked at Ash, expecting him to share some similar, profound burden of his own. Ash just poked the fire with a stick, sending a shower of sparks into the night air. I guess I'm lucky, he said simply. I never had a legacy to live up to. And I'm terrible at being anything other than myself. He grinned, a flash of his usual bright spirit. My journey was always simpler. I just wanted to be the best. But I kept losing. A lot. He looked around at his Pokémon, a deep affection in his eyes. Every time I lost, every time I failed, they were there. Pikachu, Bulbasaur, Charizard, all of them. They never cared if I was a champion or a loser who just got knocked out of another league. They just cared that I was me. That I was their friend. They always pulled me through. He looked back at the two women, his expression earnest and open. You guys have had to carry everything on your own. I've never been on my own. I've always had them. The simple, profound truth of his words settled over them. They had built their lives on their own singular strength. He had built his on a foundation of shared strength. The fire crackled, filling the silence. The distance between them, of status, of experience, of personality, had vanished. In the warm glow of a Kanto night, they were just three people, sharing their burdens and finding a common ground. To break the heavy, emotional mood, a familiar spark lit up in Ash's eyes. "You know," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "I've always wanted to know. If it was just them, no trainers, who's the toughest?" He pointed with his stick. "Garchomp, Gardevoir, or Infernape?" Cynthia raised an eyebrow, a hint of her competitive spirit returning. "Garchomp's typing gives her a distinct advantage." Diantha laughed, the sound bright and clear. "Don't underestimate Gardevoir's psychic power. She can end a fight before it even begins." "Infernape has Blaze," Ash countered, his eyes gleaming. "And he's got more fighting spirit than any Pokémon I've ever met." The challenge was unspoken but clear. A moment later, 3 Pokémon were recalled from their Pokeballs, appearing in the wide, grassy clearing near the bonfire. Garchomp, imperious and powerful. Gardevoir, elegant and radiating psychic energy. And Infernape, his head flame burning brightly, pounding his chest in anticipation. It wasn't a battle for a title or for the fate of the world. It was for fun. For the joy of it. There were no trainers shouting commands. The 3 Pokémon just looked at each other, then at their partners, who gave them encouraging nods. The fight that followed was a beautiful, fluid dance of power. It was pure instinct. Garchomp's raw, draconic fury against Gardevoir's graceful, reality-bending psychic attacks. Infernape's blistering, close-quarters combat against Garchomp's sweeping dragon claws. It was a spectacular display of their passions and their joys in their purest, most distilled form. They saw Cynthia's fierce, strategic mind in Garchomp's calculated movements. They saw Diantha's captivating grace in Gardevoir's elegant evasions. And they saw Ash's untamable, fiery heart in Infernape's relentless assault. There was no winner. After a final, spectacular clash, a dragon rush, a moonblast, and a flare blitz all colliding in a shower of multicolored sparks, the 3 Pokémon stood panting, exhausted but exhilarated, and gave each other a nod of profound respect. As they recalled their tired partners, laughing, the last of the walls between them came down. Later that night, long after Professor Oak had retired and the fire had burned down to glowing embers, the 3 of them sat on the front porch of Ash's house. A comfortable silence had settled between them, the kind that only exists between people who no longer need words. It was Diantha who finally spoke, her voice soft in the cool night air. "When I first heard about the charter, in my private cinema in Lumios, I thought it was the worst thing that had ever happened to me. The end of my career. The end of my freedom." Cynthia, leaning against the porch railing, nodded in the darkness. "I saw it as a political cage. A distasteful, archaic duty I was being forced to perform for a world that didn't understand the sacrifice." Ash looked at them, at the 2 women who had seemed so impossibly distant and powerful just a few days ago. Now, in the simple quiet of his home, he saw them as they were. Strong, yes, but also tired, burdened, and lonely. "And now?" he asked quietly. Diantha looked at him, her silhouette framed by the moonlight. She reached out, her fingers gently brushing his hand where it rested on the porch swing. Her touch was warm, hesitant, and utterly real. "Now," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "I'm not so sure." A quiet, profound understanding passed between the 3 of them in the darkness. An unspoken acknowledgement that something had fundamentally shifted. This was no longer an arrangement. It wasn't about a charter, or a mission, or a duty. It had become something else. Something real. Something they were choosing. The peaceful moment was shattered by a panicked shout from the direction of Professor Oak's lab. "Ash! Ash, get over here. Quickly!" It was Tracy's voice, laced with a terror that made Ash's blood run cold. They were on their feet in an instant, the tranquility of the evening vaporized. They sprinted up the hill, their hearts pounding. They burst into the corral to a scene of chaos. One of Ash's toros, its powerful body usually a symbol of wild strength, was on a rampage. But it was a horrifying, twisted version of a rampage. Its movements were jerky and spasmodic. Its eyes, normally dark and placid, were glowing with the same sick, hollow purple light Ash had seen in Hoenn. Veins of black energy pulsed beneath its hide. It wasn't charging with anger. It was thrashing in agony, slamming its body against trees and rocks, its cries a horrifying mix of rage and pain. The other Pokémon were keeping their distance, a mixture of fear and confusion on their faces. Professor Oak was there, his face pale, trying to analyze the phenomenon from a safe distance. It just happened. One moment he was sleeping, the next, Ash stared, his heart seizing in his chest. It was here. The null. The emptiness. It had followed him. It had found its way into the one place in the world he had thought was safe. It had come for his family. Chapter 6, The Avatar's Declaration. The null's violation of Pallet Town was not a random act of corruption. It was a message. A surgical strike against the very heart of the Monarch's strength. Ash felt it not as a strategic move, but as a personal, venomous desecration. He moved before Cynthia or Diantha could even formulate a plan. The sight of his Tauros, one of the herd he'd known for years, thrashing in the same hollow agony as Regirock, lit a cold, dangerous fire in his gut. "Don't attack it," he yelled to the other Pokémon, who were nervously circling the corrupted creature. "You'll only feed the influence. Back off." His Pokémon, sensing the iron authority in his voice, immediately obeyed. Even Charizard, who had been preparing to physically restrain the Tauros, took a hesitant step back. Ash ignored the panicked questions from Professor Oak and Tracy. He walked forward, alone, his eyes locked on the suffering Tauros. He didn't reach for a Pokeball. He did what he had done in Hoenn. He reached out with his aura. The moment he touched the edge of the null's influence, a voice slithered into his mind. It was clearer this time, more confident. It was Malachi's. "You see. It is everywhere, Monarch. This contagion of connection. This flaw in creation. There is no place so sacred it is not infected. Not even your own home. I am merely the cure." The voice was a distraction, a taunt designed to break his concentration. Ash ignored it. He pushed past the cold whisper and focused on the flicker of spirit still trapped inside the Tauros. It was a simple, stubborn animal spirit, full of memories of thundering across open plains and basking in the Kanto sun. Ash grabbed onto that spark, pouring his own energy, his own presence, into it. He didn't just send memories, he sent the feeling of the herd, the sense of belonging, the warmth of the sun on its back. For a moment, the struggle was intense. The Tauros bellowed, its body convulsing as the two forces warred within it. The purple light flared violently, fighting back, trying to snuff out the light Ash was feeding it. But Pallet Town was Ash's turf. His aura was stronger here, anchored by a lifetime of bonds. With a final, silent roar of will, he expelled the emptiness. The null's influence dissolved like smoke in the wind. The Tauros stumbled, its legs giving way. The purple light vanished from its eyes, replaced by a look of dazed confusion. It looked at Ash, let out a low, weary moo, and collapsed into an exhausted sleep. Ash stood over it, breathing heavily, the mental battle leaving him drained and shaking with fury. This was not a blind, spreading plague. This was targeted. Deliberate. An executioner's blade aimed at the place he loved most. As if on cue, every screen in Professor Oak's lab, every datapad, every television in Pallet Town, flickered and changed. Delia's worried face appeared on Ash's datapad. "Ash, the television, it's on every channel." Ash, Cynthia, and Diantha sprinted back to the lab. On the main view screen, and every other monitor in the room, a single face stared out. It was the man from the file. Malachi. He looked older than in the grainy photo, his face etched with a decade of zealous obsession. He stood in what looked like a sterile, white chamber, but the air around him seemed to shimmer, as if reality itself was thin. His dark, burning eyes looked directly into the camera, as if he were making eye contact with every single person watching across the globe. "My name is Malachi," he said, his voice calm, resonant, and filled with a chilling certainty. "And I have come to offer the world liberation." The feed was raw, bypassing all network security. It was on every channel, every streaming service, every public billboard from Goldenrod to Lumios. "For centuries, you have been told a lie," Malachi continued, his voice that of a prophet delivering a terrible gospel. "You have been told that the bond between human and Pokemon is a sacred partnership. A friendship. This is a deception. It is a parasitic relationship, a cosmic flaw that has thrown the world out of balance and brought it to the brink of ruin time and time again." He gestured, and holographic images appeared beside him. Images of war, of cities destroyed by rampaging legendaries, of Pokemon being used as tools for human greed and conflict. "Your bonds do not elevate them. They enslave them. You tether their boundless, elemental power to your own fragile, fleeting emotions. You force them into your petty squabbles, your contests, your wars. And in return, this bond grants you, the weaker species, a power you were never meant to wield. It is an unnatural and unsustainable corruption." In the lab, Professor Oak stared, horrified. "This is madness. He's twisting everything." "No," Cynthia breathed, her eyes wide with understanding. "It's not madness. It's a perfectly constructed ideology. He's using our own history against us." On the screen, Malachi's expression became one of profound, sorrowful purpose. "I was once a believer in this lie. I dedicated my life to it. Until I saw the truth. I saw a being of immense power, a legendary Pokemon, use the very bond one cherished to unmake my friends, to erase them from existence because their human emotions had become a burden. I was spared so that I could bear witness. So that I could become the herald of the cure." The air around him darkened, and for a second, the image wavered, revealing a glimpse of a vast, starless void behind him. The null. The universe, in its original state, was one of pure, silent harmony. The great nothing. The null. It has granted me the power to restore that balance. To sever the chains. To perform the great cleansing. His gaze seemed to intensify, to pierce through the screen and find Ash directly. "I will begin with the most potent symbols of your flawed ideology. I will start by cleansing the source of aura, the very energy of the soul bond you hold so dear. I will purge the tree of beginning." Ash's blood ran cold. The tree of beginning. The place where he and Lucario had saved the world, the heart of a symbiotic relationship between a living ecosystem and the Pokemon that guarded it. It was a direct challenge. "Monarch Ketchum," Malachi said, a sliver of a cruel smile on his lips. "You, who they call the master of bonds. You, who wears the crown of this corrupt system. I dare you to stop me. Come to the tree of beginning. Witness the first step in your world's salvation." The screen went black. A heavy silence fell over the lab. The global broadcast was over. The declaration had been made. "It's a trap," Diantha said instantly, her voice tight with tension. "He's calling you out, Ash. He wants to isolate you, to face you on his own terms." "Of course it's a trap," Cynthia agreed, her mind already racing, calculating variables. "He's arrogant. He believes his power is absolute. He's broadcasting his intentions because he doesn't believe we can stop him. It's a classic case of hubris." Ash wasn't listening to their analysis. He was already moving. He walked over to his Lucario, who had been watching the broadcast, its body rigid with tension. Ash placed a hand on its shoulder. Their auras connected, a silent, instant communication. "We're going." "Ash, wait," Cynthia said, stepping forward. "We need a plan. Rushing in is what he wants." "I know," Ash said, turning to face them. The boyish charm was gone, replaced by the grim, focused resolve of a monarch at war. And we're not going to give it to him. But we can't ignore the threat. If he corrupts the tree, the mew that lives there, the consequences could be irreversible. He looked at them, his plan already formed, a brilliant, instinctive countermove. We can't beat him if we're all in one place. We tried that in Castelia, and it was chaos until the last second. This time, we use our strengths properly. He pointed at the large, holographic map of the world on the lab's main console. Cynthia, the tree of beginning is located in a remote mountain range north of Pewter City. There are only 3 viable land routes and 2 air corridors to approach it. Your expertise is strategy, containment. I want you there. Not at the tree itself, but controlling the battlefield. Take Garchomp, your other Pokémon. Position your forces. Cut off every escape route. Turn the entire mountain range into a cage. He gets in, but he does not get out. Cynthia stared, her strategist's mind immediately seeing the brilliance of the plan. He wasn't asking her to be his shield. He was asking her to be a general, to command the field on a macro level. She gave a sharp, decisive nod. It will be done. Ash then turned to Diantha. Diantha, your strength is your network, your influence. We can't just vanish without the world noticing. Sirdar's faction will be watching our every move. You're the public face. You run interference. You coordinate with Lance, with Steven, with the other champions. Tell them what's happening. Get them to lock down their regions, to watch for any secondary attacks. Use your charisma, your authority, to manage the global response. Keep the world from panicking while we handle Malachi. You are our voice. Diantha's eyes lit up. He wasn't sidelining her to a support role. He was giving her command of the entire global political and communication theater. It was a role she was born to play. I'm on it. I'll have every region on high alert within the hour. Finally, he looked at Lucario, then back at them. And me? I'm the tip of the spear. Malachi called me out. He wants a confrontation. I'll give him one. Pikachu leaped onto his shoulder, his cheeks crackling with determination. Lucario, Pikachu, and I will go to the tree. We'll be the bait. We'll draw his fire, keep him focused on us, while Cynthia builds the cage and Diantha secures the world around us. It was a perfectly coordinated, 3-pronged strategy that played to each of their absolute strengths. It wasn't a plan they had debated. It was a command given by a monarch who knew his team, a leader who trusted his champions implicitly. It's risky, Cynthia stated, not as an objection, but as a final assessment. It's our only shot, Ash replied. Now, let's move. We don't have much time. The air near the tree of beginning was thick with a strange, oppressive energy. The usual vibrant hum of aura that permeated the area was muted, replaced by a discordant, chilling static. Ash, Lucario, and Pikachu moved silently through the crystalline forests that surrounded the tree, the landscape eerily familiar yet horribly wrong. He is here, Ash, Lucario projected, his head crest raised, sensing the disturbance. His presence is like a wound in the world. It is centered at the heart of the tree. They reached the cavernous entrance, the same one Ash had entered years ago. The crystal formations that lined the walls, which should have been glowing with a soft, warm light, were dim, some flickering with faint, sickly purple veins. The tree's natural defense systems, the crystal antibodies, were being corrupted. He's poisoning it, Ash breathed, his hand clenching into a fist. They descended into the heart of the tree, a massive chamber where a river of pure aura flowed around a central, pulsating crystal nexus. And there, floating in the center of the chamber, was Malachi. He was no longer just a man. The null's power flowed around him, a tangible cloak of shadow and void energy. He wasn't just wielding it, he was becoming one with it. He had his hand outstretched towards the tree's heart, and streams of dark, empty energy were flowing from his palm, seeping into the crystal, turning its vibrant blue light to a bruised purple. "You came," Malachi said, not turning around. His voice echoed in the vast chamber, seeming to come from everywhere at once. "I knew you would. The shepherd cannot resist running to the aid of a sick sheep." "The tree isn't sick," Ash called out, his voice steady. "You're poisoning it. Stop this, Malachi." Malachi finally turned, a look of pity on his face. "I am not poisoning it. I am liberating it. This nexus is a focal point for the lie of the soul bond. It amplifies the flawed connection between this ecosystem and the Pokémon within it. I am simply turning it off." He flexed his fingers, and the purple corruption spread, causing the entire chamber to groan, the crystals to flicker violently. "This ends now," Ash declared. "Lucario, Aura Sphere. Pikachu, Thunderbolt." The twin attacks, a bolt of pure lightning and a sphere of brilliant blue aura, shot across the chamber. Malachi simply raised his free hand. A disk of pure blackness, a hole in reality, materialized in front of him. The attacks plunged into it and vanished without a sound, without a trace. "Your power is based on connection," Malachi said with a condescending smile. "On the transfer of energy. I am the absence of energy. You cannot attack a void. You are throwing stones into a bottomless pit." From the shadows around him, Pokémon emerged. A Metagross, a Salamence, a Tyranitar. They were magnificent, powerful specimens, but their eyes were hollow, glowing with the same purple light. They were husks, puppets animated by Malachi's will. "You see?" Malachi taunted. "Their bonds to their former trainers made them vulnerable. I simply offered them a better partnership. One with purpose. One without the messy burden of emotion. Now, they serve the great nothing." The corrupted Pokémon lunged. The battle began, a frantic, desperate struggle in the heart of the dying tree. Ash, Pikachu, and Lucario fought with perfect synergy, a blur of motion and energy. But it was a draining fight. Their opponents fought without pain, without fear, without exhaustion. They were relentless, their attacks brutal and efficient. Worse, the very environment was turning against them. Malachi, with a wave of his hand, corrupted the tree's defenses. Crystalline antibodies, which should have been targeting him, instead formed jagged spikes on the floor or fired shards of rock at Ash and his Pokémon. The battle was ideological as much as it was physical. With every clash, Malachi's voice echoed in Ash's mind, a constant, insidious whisper. "Look at them, Monarch. Fighting so hard for a lie. You force them to feel your pain, your fear. Is that love? Is that partnership? I have freed them from that. I have given them peace." He showed Ash a vision, a psychic illusion of Pikachu, old and weary, fading away, its bond to the mortal Ash a chain that had held it back from a greater existence. "He's trying to break you, Ash." Lucario yelled, fending off a brutal psychic assault from the corrupted Metagross. "I know." Ash gritted out, shaking the vision from his head. They were being worn down. For every husk they managed to knock out, another seemed to take its place. Malachi was just toying with them, his main effort still focused on corrupting the tree's heart. The blue light of the central crystal was almost entirely gone, replaced by a pulsating, malevolent purple. They needed to end this. They needed to get to Malachi himself. "Lucario, we have to go all in." Ash yelled, tapping the keystone on his glove. "Let our hearts become one. Mega Evolve." A torrent of energy erupted from Ash, flowing into Lucario. The Aura Pokémon roared as its form shifted, growing sleeker, more powerful, its appendages tipped with crimson energy. Mega Lucario stood ready, its power level skyrocketing. "Now, Pikachu. Full power." Ash shouted, grabbing his cap and turning it backward. Together. In a flash of pure, desperate brilliance, Ash and his two partners unleashed everything they had. Pikachu leaped onto Mega Lucario's back. Mega Lucario, in turn, began to form the largest aura sphere it had ever created, a sun of blue energy. Pikachu then poured all of his own electrical power into the sphere. The result was a swirling vortex of blue and yellow, a cataclysm of aura and electricity, a move born of their absolute, unbreakable bond. Dragon Pulse. Mega Lucario roared, firing the attack not as a sphere, but as a massive, concentrated beam. Thunder. Pikachu shrieked, unleashing his own power as a focused torrent that wrapped around the Dragon Pulse, supercharging it. The combined attack, an aura-infused thunder pulse, ripped across the chamber. It tore through Malakai's Pokémon husks, who were instantly vaporized by a power they could not comprehend. It slammed into the void shield Malakai desperately threw up. For a moment, the two forces met, the ultimate expression of bond and connection versus the absolute power of nothingness. The shield held, but cracks began to form in the air around it. The sheer, overwhelming reality of Ash's attack was too much for the void to simply absorb. With a final, deafening roar, the beam punched through. It didn't hit Malakai directly. It struck the wall behind him, the explosion of energy shaking the tree to its very foundations. Malakai was thrown backward, his concentration broken. The flow of dark energy into the tree's heart ceased. Ash and his Pokémon stood panting, exhausted, but triumphant. They had done it. They had driven him back. But as the smoke cleared, Malakai was getting to his feet. He wasn't injured. He was, smiling. A genuine, triumphant smile. Impressive, he said, brushing a speck of dust from his clothes. A truly magnificent display of the flaw. You poured everything you had into protecting this symbol. He looked up at the heart of the tree, which was slowly, painfully beginning to push back the corruption, its blue light returning. But a symbol is all it is, Malakai said, his smile widening. And while you were here, defending this quaint little bauble, you've left the real prize completely unguarded. A cold dread washed over Ash. A feint. This entire, elaborate confrontation, it was all a distraction. A chime came from his datapad. It was a frantic, panicked emergency broadcast from the Hoenn region, sent out on all champion-level channels. It was Lance's voice. All champions, respond. We have a massive, unprecedented null energy signature appearing at the peak of the Sky Pillar. Repeat, the Sky Pillar. He's going after Rayquaza. Malakai laughed, a cold, empty sound that echoed through the chamber. The tree of beginning amplifies the bond. But Rayquaza? It is a bond. The bond between the sky and the earth, the protector of the very atmosphere. When I sever that, this world will truly begin to unravel. He dissolved into a swirl of shadows, the null's power teleporting him away. You protect the past, Monarch. While I prepare to unmake the future. Ash stood frozen, the victory he had felt moments ago turning to ash in his mouth. He had fallen for the trap completely. He had played his part perfectly in Malakai's plan. And now, the heavens themselves were about to fall. Chapter 7, The Heavens Fall. The frantic energy of Lance's broadcast was a spark in a powder keg. Across the globe, the covert network Diantha had been building roared to life. In the Kalos Command Center, screens lit up with the faces of champions and Elite Four members, their expressions a mixture of grim understanding and disbelief. Sky Pillar confirmed, Stephen Stone's voice came through, sharp and clear. He was already in a private jet, the roar of its engines a low hum in the background. I'm en route. Wallace is mobilizing the Hoenn League fleet. ETA 20 minutes, but that may be too late. I'm redirecting from my position, Cynthia's voice cut in, her hologram appearing on Ash's datapad as he and his exhausted Pokémon scrambled out of the tree of beginning. The background behind her was a blur of motion. Garchomp and I can reach Hoenn in 15. But I have no forces there. I'll be going in blind. Ash didn't waste time on apologies or regrets. The feint had worked. He had been outmaneuvered. The only thing that mattered now was the response. Diantha, he yelled into his comm unit as he leaped onto the back of his newly arrived Charizard, who had been flown in as part of Cynthia's containment strategy. The plan has changed. Forget secrecy. Forget panic control. I need everyone. Now. In Lumio City, Diantha stood before her wall of screens, the very picture of calm authority in a storm of rising chaos. Understood, Ash. I'm issuing a global threat alert on all champion channels. All available high-level trainers are to converge on the Sky Pillar immediately. I'm declaring Code Omega. A stunned silence fell over the network. Code Omega was a theoretical protocol, a doomsday scenario that had never been invoked. It meant a threat capable of causing a planetary extinction-level event. It was the ultimate call to arms. May Arceus be with us all, Lance's voice murmured over the calm. The race had begun. The journey to Hoenn was a blur of wind and desperate speed. Ash pushed Charizard to his absolute limit, flying low over the ocean, a streak of orange against the churning blue. The 15 minutes it took felt like an eternity, every second a reminder of Malachi's head start. When they arrived, the scene was already one of apocalyptic grandeur. The Sky Pillar, an ancient, crumbling tower that reached into the clouds, was the epicenter of a swirling vortex of unnatural energy. A tempest of black and purple clouds, shot through with veins of negative lightning, churned around the tower, creating a violent storm that battered the sea below. Hoenn's League fleet, a collection of state-of-the-art naval vessels, was trying to establish a perimeter, but their progress was being hammered by the supernatural weather and by what lay within it. A legion of corrupted Pokémon, Gyarados with glowing purple eyes whipping the sea into a frenzy, swarms of Skarmory diving like shadowy missiles, their wings crackling with null energy, formed a living, breathing wall around the tower. Ash, we're here. Cynthia's voice crackled. He looked up to see her Garchomp, a predator of the skies, diving through the storm clouds, Cynthia riding on its back like a Valkyrie of old. Moments later, a silver jet screamed overhead, and Steven Stone leaped from the back ramp, landing gracefully on the back of his own ace, a gleaming Metagross that emerged from its pokeball midair. Lance was already there, his Dragonite a beacon of orange fury, blasting a corrupted Aerodactyl out of the sky with a hyper beam. The champions of the world were assembling for war. He's at the top. Steven yelled over the wind, pointing towards the summit of the tower, barely visible through the swirling chaos. He's using the storm to channel energy for some kind of ritual. We have to break through their lines and get up that tower. Lance commanded, his voice the rallying cry of a born leader. Champions, form up. We punch the hole, the rest of the League forces will follow. What followed was not a battle. It was a war. A symphony of cataclysmic power unleashed upon a tide of corrupted flesh. It was a sight that the world had not seen since the ancient clashes of legends. Lance's Dragonite and Steven's Metagross became the vanguard, a hammer of dragonfire and psychic steel that smashed into the enemy lines. Wallace of Setopolis, arriving on the back of his elegant Milotic, commanded the waves themselves, creating massive waterspouts to ensnare the corrupted Gyarados. Iris and her Haxorus became a spinning whirlwind of draconic destruction, carving a path through swarms of lesser foes. Ash and Cynthia arrived in the heart of the fray, their own aces adding to the maelstrom. Charizard's flamethrower was a river of fire that cleansed the sky, while Garchomp's Dragon Rush was a physical battering ram that shattered enemy formations. For a moment, their combined might seemed overwhelming. They were the strongest trainers in the world, their bonds with their partners perfected over a lifetime of battle. They pushed the corrupted forces back, the sheer power and synergy of their aces a testament to the very philosophy Malachi sought to destroy. But their enemies were relentless. They felt no pain, no fear. And for every one that fell, two more seemed to rise from the storm. It was in the midst of this chaos that the betrayal came. On the bridge of the HLV Dauntless, the flagship of the Hoenn fleet, a junior communications officer saw the message flash across his screen. It was a high-priority command, encrypted with Chairman Surdar's personal authorization codes. CMD, all support fleet vessels. Code 7 Gamma. Disengage primary assault. Reroute power to long-range containment shields. Maintain perimeter at 10 kilometers. Do not engage. The officer stared in disbelief. Code 7 Gamma. Disengage. They were supposed to be providing fire support, reinforcing the champions. Sir, he yelled to his captain. We have a priority 1 order from the chairman's office. It's a retreat order. The captain snatched the datapad, his face paling as he read it. What in blazes? That's suicide. The champions will be cut off. He tried to open a channel back to League Command, but the lines were dead, jammed with static. Across the fleet, the same order was received. Confused and bound by protocol, ship captains began to disengage. The barrage of supporting fire that had been suppressing the larger corrupted Pokémon faltered. The containment line, meant to keep the chaos from spreading to the mainland, became a wall, trapping the champions inside with the enemy. Diantha, watching from her command center in Lumios, saw the fleet's movements on her tactical display. She saw the red icons representing the League ships pull back, their energy signatures shifting from offense to a defensive posture. No, she whispered, her eyes wide with horror. He wouldn't. She frantically tried to override the command, but Surdar had used a level of encrypted authority that even she couldn't instantly bypass. He had planned for this. Humiliated at the summit, he had chosen his moment to strike back. He couldn't defeat Ash, so he had decided to let the Null do it for him. By cutting off their support, he was sacrificing his rivals, Ash, Cynthia, all the champions who had defied him, to the storm, hoping to seize control of the League in the ensuing power vacuum. It wasn't a political move. It was murder. Surdar has betrayed us. Diantha's voice screamed over the comms, laced with a fury no one had ever heard from her before. Reinforcements are cut off. You're on your own. The news hit the embattled champions like a physical blow. The tide of the battle turned instantly. The corrupted Pokémon, no longer suppressed by the fleet's firepower, surged forward, their numbers suddenly overwhelming. Lance's Dragonite was swarmed by a pack of shadowy Flygon. Steven's Metagross was forced onto the defensive, shielding them from a massive onslaught of combined hyper beams. The hole they had punched was closing. Surdar, watching from a secure bunker miles away, a small, bitter smile on his face, didn't have long to savor his treachery. A squad of Colossian Special Forces, acting on Diantha's direct, non-league authority, smashed through the door of his bunker. He looked up, his face a mask of shock and indignation, as they surrounded him. His play for power had lasted less than 5 minutes. He was apprehended without a fight, a pathetic, defeated man whose ambition had led him to betray the entire world for a moment of petty revenge. But the damage was done. We can't hold them. Wallace shouted, as his Milotic was struck by a blast of null energy that made it cry out in pain. The tower is our only chance. It was Ash who saw the opening. A fleeting, suicidal path through the heart of the enemy maelstrom. Cynthia. Diantha. With me, he roared, his voice cutting through the storm. He didn't wait for a reply. He urged Charizard downward, into the thickest part of the fighting. We're going up. It was a move of pure, beautiful madness. Diantha, who had arrived on the back of her own Dragonite just as the betrayal occurred, didn't hesitate. She followed his descent. Cynthia, seeing his intent, broke off her own engagement and dove after them. Lance. Steven. Hold the line. Ash yelled back. Give us 5 minutes. Lance gritted his teeth, seeing the desperate gamble. Go. We'll buy you your time. The three of them became a comet of fire and purpose. Ash's Charizard, Cynthia's Garchomp, and Diantha's Gardevoir, who had emerged to create a psychic shield around them, plunged towards the base of the sky pillar. They didn't go around the enemy, they went through them. The ascent was a grueling, vertical battle. The inside of the ancient tower was a crumbling spiral staircase, open to the raging storm outside. Corrupted Pokémon, Claydol, Skarmory, powerful dragon types, had made their nests on every level, turning the climb into a gauntlet. There was no room for grand strategy. It was close quarters, brutal, and instinctual. They fought as a seamless unit, the bond between them now an unspoken, telepathic thing. A corrupted Metagross blocked their path, its psychic power warping the very stone of the staircase. Gardevoir, reflect. Diantha commanded. A shield of light appeared, deflecting the attack. Ash, now. Pikachu, Iron Tail. Ash yelled. Pikachu, riding on his back, leaped forward, his tail glowing, and used the reflect shield as a springboard, slamming his attack into the Metagross's weak point and sending it tumbling out of the tower. Higher up, a swarm of venomous Crobat descended from the ceiling. Garchomp, Stone Edge. Cynthia ordered. Spikes of rock shot from the walls, creating a cage around the bats. It was a perfect trap, but one burst through, diving for Diantha. Look out! Ash yelled, but it was too late. He threw himself in front of her, taking the full force of a poison fang to his shoulder. He cried out, staggering, a searing pain shooting through his arm. Ash! Diantha cried, her face pale with fear. She and Gardevoir unleashed a furious, combined moonblast that vaporized the Crobat. She rushed to his side, her hands glowing as Gardevoir used Heal Pulse, but the null-tainted poison was resistant. I'm fine, Ash grunted, pushing himself up, his face slick with sweat. We keep moving. They covered each other, their Pokémon fighting back to back. A single word, a shared glance, was all that was needed to coordinate a devastating combo. Garchomp's Brick Break shattered a corrupted Rhyperior's defense, allowing Pikachu's Thunderbolt to find its mark. Gardevoir's Psychic held a frenzied Salamence in place just long enough for Garchomp's Dragon Claw to finish it. The trust between them was absolute, forged in fire and polished in the crucible of this desperate climb. They were bruised, exhausted, Ash's arms screaming in protest with every move. But they were nearing the top. The wind howled with incredible force, and the air grew thin, crackling with raw, untamed power. They burst through the final doorway onto the summit of the sky pillar. The sight that met them stole the breath from their lungs. The summit was a circular platform, its edges crumbling into the storm below. In the center, etched with glowing green runes, was the altar of the sky. Trapped above it, held in a vortex of swirling black and purple energy, was Rayquaza. The magnificent sky dragon, protector of the planet, was writhing in agony. Its serpentine body was wrapped in tendrils of pure null energy, which were visibly draining the life, the very color, from its emerald scales. It let out a pained, ethereal roar that was lost in the raging storm. And floating before it, his back to them, was Malachi. He was no longer a man. He was a monstrous figure of shadow and light, a being of pure, unadulterated power. The null had almost completely consumed him, turning him into a true avatar of its emptiness. He held his hands out to the struggling Rayquaza, pouring the full force of the storm, the full power of his being, into the ritual. He wasn't trying to corrupt Rayquaza. He was trying to unmake it. To sever its ancient, conceptual bond to the planet's atmosphere, a move that would cause the sky to collapse, the climate to shatter, and the world to choke. He turned his head slowly, his eyes no longer human, but twin black holes of infinite coldness. You are too late, he declared, his voice a chorus of chilling whispers. The null's power flared, and the vortex around Rayquaza tightened. A visible crack, like a fissure in glass, appeared in the sky above them, spreading outwards, the blue turning to a terrifying, empty black. Witness the unmaking. Chapter 8, The Bond That Defies Oblivion. The final battle, the fight against the fully empowered Malachi begins. It's a 6-on-1 battle with their aces, Pikachu, Garchomp, Gardevoir, and their other powerhouses like Charizard, Metagross, and Goodra. But Malachi is on another level. He doesn't just fight, he erases. Attacks dissipate before they hit him. The very space around him feels empty. He's not just a vessel for the null, he is the null. The realization, they are losing. Their Pokémon are exhausted, and Malachi's power is absolute. He feeds on their aggression and despair. In a moment of clarity, as Lucario stumbles from a null-powered blow, Ash understands. They cannot destroy nothingness. They can't fight a void. They have to fill it. The ultimate bond, Ash calls out to Cynthia and Diantha. Don't fight him. Connect with me. It's a massive leap of faith. The three of them, standing together, lower their defenses. They reach out, not with attacks, but with their aura, their spirit, their combined bond with their Pokémon. They pour every ounce of their shared experience, the respect forged in Castelia, the trust built at the summit, the affection discovered in Pallet Town, the unity from the Tree of Beginning, into a single, overwhelming wave of pure, positive energy. The unraveling of hate, this wave of pure connection is anathema to the null. It doesn't hurt Malachi, it floods him. He is deluged with the very thing he sought to destroy: love, trust, partnership, loyalty. We see flashes of his own past, the love he once had for Pokémon, the moment of trauma that twisted it into hate. The null, an entity of pure entropy, cannot exist in a space so full of life. It is driven back, not destroyed, but forced into a deep dormancy within the fabric of reality. The aftermath, Malachi collapses, the null's power gone, leaving him just a man, weeping for what he had lost and what he had tried to do. Rayquaza is freed, and with a grateful cry, it restores the sky. The world is saved. A new beginning. Weeks later, the world is rebuilding. In a quiet ceremony, not a grand wedding, but a private one attended only by their closest friends and Pokémon, Ash, Cynthia, and Diantha stand before a simple officiant. The Monarch's charter is on a table beside them. Diantha pushes it aside. "We're not doing this because of some law," she says. Cynthia nods, taking her hand and Ash's. "We are doing this because we choose to." Ash grins, his familiar, boundless grin. "Together?" he asks. "Together," they reply in unison. Final scene. The final shot is of the three of them standing on a balcony overlooking the post-Monarch world, not as a king and his queens, but as a triad, a team. The adventure is over, but their journey together is just beginning. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.